My faith decreases a little more every time Xaden slips, and I ain't feeling good. And that's probably the theme of this episode. I ain't feeling good, guys.
I don't like it here.
I don't like it here. Holding our cardboard sign.
Yeah. Welcome back to the Booked Up Fantasy Podcast.
I'm Addison.
I'm Lorraine, and we are two best friends who explore the world of fantasy through book shows and movies, but with a heavy emphasis on books. Today we are covering Onyx Storm chapters 38 through 43, and we are diving into everything Zehyllna and the irids. First and foremost, we do need to have a moment of silence for Traeger. Rest in peace to our flying healer. But then, damn, what a teasing set of chapters. We finally meet the irids after waiting all this time, going on all these missions, trying to find them, only for them to whisk away our hope, but not to worry. We, of course, still have many thoughts about it all, so...
I gotta be honest, Traeger's death, I was like, me, okay. But when Silaraine died, I was like, no! She was just a baby! It wasn't her fault!
I know. Every time it talks about the bonds between, the dragons or, the griffins and show descriptive stuff about how they're feeling about things, then it really gets to me, and I'm like, oh no.
I know. We just didn't know Traeger that well, so it was really seeing, how devastated Kat was. That made me sad. It's everyone else's reactions, but to be honest, I was like, if someone had to go, Traeger is fine. I'm fine with it.
As a quick reminder, we are a spoiler-free podcast. We have only read up to the chapters we are covering and no further, so we have no idea what's to come in the rest of the book. With that being said, we will be discussing chapters 38 through 43 specifically, but it is likely that references to the previous chapters, as well as Fourth Wing and Iron Flame, will come up. If you are not caught up, then definitely stop here and then come back when you are. Furthermore, we would like to remind everyone that this is an adult podcast where we will have adult conversations. Explicit language or potentially triggering topics may be discussed, so please be mindful of that and adjust accordingly. Housekeeping. If you are reading along with us, the next week's episode will cover chapters 44 through 49. And second, if you are a fan of our Onyx Storm coverage, then the best way for you to support us is to leave us a review. So whatever you are doing right at this moment, take a pause, get out your phone, and put in a quick little rating. If you're on Spotify, you just do a quick star rating. If you're on Apple, you can do the stars, or we love to read ratings. So
we love reviews. We live for them. Xaden is addicted to power and we're addicted to reviews. Okay. Every time we get one, we're like, oh my God. And I'm being so genuine when I tell you I frequently go back and reread them because it's very gratifying and motivating. It just makes me feel good. It's a hit of dopamine. I'm not going to lie. Unless it's bad. When there's a bad one, that feels bad. But that's okay. Can't please them all.
Constructive criticism, I guess. But we do feature every so often, I'll get in there and post them to social media and stuff, so you can see your reviews there. All right. That's it for housekeeping, and now let's get into the episode. We will start with a book report where Addison will summarize each chapter. Next, we will convene a meeting of the assembly where we will deep dive, analyze, and theorize each chapter. And finally, to end the episode, we will share our favorite moments from the set of chapters discussed. With that being said, Addison, please give us the book report.
With rage that will shine through as we continue. I hate the irids, okay? I can't hide it. No, literally. You'll see as we go on. I got real heated. But anyways, chapter 38. Zehyllna has magic and the people are happy to see them, ? Not only that, but they would be happy to ally with them and all they have to do is get presents? ? Again? No way it could be that easy. To their surprise and my surprise, it basically was. Each member of the squad has to select the cards Zihnal drew them to and accept the gifts Zihnal blessed them with, without complaint. Seems easy enough, and at first it was easy. Almost too easy. Until poor Traeger selected the arrow card, the crowd went silent and time slowed. Traeger took 3 fumbling footsteps. He was dead before Riddick and Violet could catch him. Chapter 39. Time comes to a standstill as the squad tries to process what just happened to Traeger, but there was no time to think, let alone grieve. With the help of Xaden's assurance through the bond, Violet pulled herself together and thanked Calixta for Traeger's gift. Fuck them. Later, the squad reunited in a moonlit field. Auric was able to successfully negotiate a favorable alliance for Navarre, and the squad decides that they will detour to a minor isle to burn Traeger and Silaraine's body, and then head to Loisum. As Violet tries to sleep, she finds that her mind is too troubled, and she and Xaden have a heart-to-heart that made us all fall in love with Xaden Ryerson a little more. He tells Violet that, like it or not, she is destined for leadership, and when she finally embraces it, she will be an unstoppable force. She has to be, because there is no cure for Xaden. There is only Violet. Chapter 40. The squad heads northwest to find an isle to burn Traeger and Silaraine. Just as Violet was ready to call it, thank Amari, they spotted land. They quickly land on the beach of a small deserted isle and begin building the funeral pyre. With honor, love, and gratitude, they commend Traeger and Silaraine's souls to Malik, and Atrum lights the pyre. By morning, the pyre is almost burnt out, and so Violet sets the plan for the day. She breaks the squad into groups and assigns them a cluster of minor isles to investigate. Violet and Riddick hang back to monitor the pyre until it burns out, and Violet settles in against Andarna to wait. Suddenly, the ground shudders again and again, sand jumps and water sprays, and directly in front of her, fresh dragon tracks appeared. Moments later, 6 irids materialized right before her eyes. A loud slide whistle sound filled her head, and a heartbeat later, she heard the words, "Hello, human." Chapter 41. Violet is understandably freaking the fuck out. It isn't until Andarna wakes and tells the irids to give Violet some space that they back off. Turns out irids are actually polite, which is interesting, but by far the least interesting thing we learn in this chapter. Taryn and Atrum arrive, and after it's quickly determined the irids are not there to fight, they all relax. Sort of. The irids then ask Andarna to tell her story, and so she does from the very beginning. As Andarna tells her story, it becomes obvious to Violet that this isn't going as well as Andarna thinks it is, and that the irids are appalled by much of what they hear. When Andarna finishes her story, the irids discuss what they have learned privately and tell Andarna she is a Criterion left behind to test humans, and her human, Violet, failed. A heartbroken Andarna fiercely defends Violet, but that seems to only make things worse. Chapter 42. If you are confused as fuck in this moment, then you are not alone. Violet has no idea what they're talking about, and neither do we. And per usual, we get no answer. The confusion and frustration doesn't stop there. Things quickly go from bad to worse with the irids. Violet has had enough and marches forward to defend Andarna, but all it does is make the irids even angrier. Andarna begs them and tries to reason with them to stay and help, but they refuse. The blows keep coming when the irids tell them that there is no cure for being venin because a piece of the soul dies in exchange for the power. Xaden and Garrick arrive, and Riddick gives them the quick debrief that it isn't going well. The irid Leothan stays behind to continue asking questions, but once he realizes what Xaden is, he asks how they could align themselves with an abomination, and he pieces out. Chaos ensues. A heartbroken Andarna runs off into the forest, and Taryn chases after her. Violet tries to reassure Xaden that he isn't an abomination, and Riddick tells Violet she has one chance to come clean and tell him what the actual fuck is going on. Chapter 43. Violet quickly tells Riddick a condensed version of the story and begs him to wait until they can talk more in private. Some of the squad arrives back and they break the news to them. Things did not go well with the irids. They discuss their plans to head back to Basgiath, and they all agree they will skip Loisum. Violet and Riddick head into the jungle, and she tells them the full story. Violet is somehow shocked that Riddick is upset and doesn't trust Vaden? What? It's almost as if Violet has blinders on when it comes to Xaden. Riddick agrees to keep Violet's secret under a few conditions, and Violet agrees. As they head back to camp, they run into Xaden, and Riddick assures him that the lightning strike he saw wasn't from, well, you know. Riddick then sets terms with Xaden for keeping the secret, and he agrees. Violet's safety comes before everything else. The squad heads back to Basgiath War College, where the squad is reunited. Hooray! Except Traeger, R.I.P. But their joy is short-lived when Colonel Atos arrives at the scene and gives Violet a threatening letter from Theophany and tells the squad that Queen Maraya is dead. And that concludes the book report.
Wow. Again, what a cliffhanger. Every single set of chapters.
Literally, like, what? I know. And I mean, we're getting to the end of the book, so that's just going to continue.
We're on that.
We're on the up at the roller coaster. We're about to tip over the edge.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. That's what I was trying to say. It's just like motioning.
I know. Lorraine was moving her arm up.
I couldn't think of the words. But yeah, thank you for the book report. And now let's convene our meeting with the assembly and get into the analysis. And of course, we have our overarching thoughts to start us off.
I have been holding my breath, just waiting for something bad to happen, and it finally came to pass in this set of chapters. R.I.P. Traeger and Silaraine. I'm going to be totally honest here, and I kind of already said this at the very beginning of the episode. If it had to be someone, then Traeger was probably the best one to go, because I will not allow it to be Violet, Xaden, Mira Riddick, or basically any of the others. Of the quest squad, I was least attached to Traeger, and then probably Drake. So it was sad, but yeah, whatever. We'll move on. My second overarching thought is the irids suck. They suck. We will, of course, be talking about this nonstop throughout this episode, but this is your warning now. The more I read and reread and analyzed, the angrier I got about the irids and their holier-than-thou attitude. So just letting you all know right now, it is highly likely I'm going to get heated during those chapters, so just prepare yourself.
I know, they were so unhelpful.
Yes, so unhelpful and self-righteous. It was the self-righteous part. It wasn't that they didn't agree to help us, that they were like, we're better than you, we're leaving, bye. And I'm like...
That's so true. My main overarching thoughts are A, poor baby Andarna. All she's ever wanted was to fit in and make everyone proud, but to see her straight up rejected by the irids was truly awful, and she didn't deserve that. And then B, I was, like you said, very disappointed about the lack of information from the irids. I was so set on them being able to provide information, and then we meet them, have this whole discussion, and get pretty much nothing out of it. And my hope definitely diminished rapidly. But on the opposite end of that, I did remember we know basically nothing about dragons, and it is entirely possible they are withholding information or lying. Or, I mean, maybe they truly don't know that much about the venin. So I'm taking what they have to say with a grain of salt, and we'll see. Just have to keep reading.
Oh, totally. I think I have some notes about the Empyrean where I'm just like, you know what? I trust nothing and no one. I don't know. I think I'm just demoralized. You know, the irids came in, they crushed our dreams, broke Andarna's heart, and then left. And I'm just like, I hate dragons.
Well, we're like, what, 75% of the way through the book, basically, or whatever.
Probably,
maybe.
yeah.
But we haven't learned anything that useful.
We've learned nothing. We know nothing.
Which is frustrating from a reading perspective.
But... And less spicy scenes. So we don't even have that to console ourselves with. So, you know, as I'm saying it, why are we still reading this book? What are we doing? Man, the existential crisis is really settling in. I think I'm reflecting Violet's state of mind right now because I am not feeling good.
Just blank stare or king prawn. It's one of the two.
Both.
Okay, so that concludes our overarching thoughts. And let's get into the main chapters, starting with chapter 38, The Excerpt. This excerpt is also from Asher Sorengale's research, and this time it comes from research titled Zehyllna, Isle of Zihnal. It discusses how to live in Zihnal, you must accept luck as your guide and chaos as your standard. I'd say that pretty much feels exactly like what happened. Everyone got a quote-unquote gift, and no matter what it was, you just had to accept the outcome, even when it includes death. I guess that's like the symbolism for this isle, the idea that everything happens for a reason. I think the popular term for it is burnt toast theory, and the example is when you burn your toast and you end up running late for work or wherever you're going to. This was actually considered like a blessing in disguise because in being late, you missed a car accident that happened right when you normally would have been on the road or, you know, something similar to that. So I guess I'll be keeping an eye out on these gifts everyone got because some way, either symbolically or literally, they may end up coming back around later on.
Go ahead and add that to the watch list, gift watch. I thought the exact same thing about the gifts. And their symbolic or actual literal nature. We will definitely talk about them more in depth when we get into that chapter.
Aside from that, the whole gift trial process was fraught with tension and unease because you couldn't easily predict what the cards meant, nor do we know what any of these gifts actually mean.
I also just feel like what Asher says about the Isle really rings true. We only get a brief glimpse of life on Zehyllna, but it really is chaos. You have thousands of people in rotation on a daily basis just waiting to see if they get, quote unquote, lucky enough to see the quest squad arrive. And just the whole way the game played out seemed really chaotic. Who can just not go to work and handle their responsibilities at home to sit in bleachers all day to see a dragon show up? You know, the whole isle just reeks of chaos.
Aside from Zehyllna in general, I also wanted to note that Asher in this excerpt is now of major rank. So he has ranked up again since his time researching Hedotus. And while we are on this note, I need to make a correction. When we first made the connection that Asher Daxton is Asher Sorrengail, we were discussing different ranks that Asher had when we get different excerpts. And we also brought up Colonel Daxton's guide to excelling the scribe quadrant. I believe at the time I was like, oh my God, Colonel Daxton is Asher Sorrengail. What a revelation. And I was like, okay, well, clearly he wrote this guide to excelling in the scribe quadrant. Well, so that is actually likely not the case. And I was wrong because as I was reviewing the different excerpts we get from Asher, I was also looking at the military ranks for commissioned officers again, and I realized that a colonel rank is higher than a lieutenant colonel. I think I misread the rankings or didn't look at all of them when I initially looked it up. But anyways, this is my official correction. So for commissioned officers, the ranks from lowest to highest go first lieutenant, second lieutenant, captain, major lieutenant, colonel, brigadier general, major general, lieutenant general, general, and then general of the army. So Asher Sorrengail was most likely a lieutenant colonel when he died because we know his research on feathertails and the Second Crowland Uprising was the last thing he was working on before he died. And according to the excerpts about that, we see he was a lieutenant colonel. That ranks just below a colonel, as was the rank of Colonel Daxton in the scribe guide, so it probably wasn't Asher Sorrengail. This does, however, mean that Colonel Daxton was related to Asher Sorrengail, possibly a parent or a grandparent, but unclear as to who exactly at this time. Maybe Grandma Niara was a scribe, which could be really interesting. Maybe this is why Violet asked Mira if Grandma Niara knew anything about Papa Sorrengail's research on the Isles.
Ooh, yes. And I will come to your defense. I think at the time we're like, oh, totally, they're the same person. But I did think we'd point out that it's possible it could have been a relation, a father, grandfather, or I guess it doesn't have to be a father because it's not gendered. So a relative of Asher. So yeah, we did throw out that possibility. We're just issuing a slight correction on the probability of our leanings at the time. But we do know for sure his last name before marrying Lilith was Daxton because in Hedotus, Ferris says to Violet, "You're Asher Daxton's girl." And so there is almost certainly a connection between Colonel Daxton, who wrote Excelling in the Scribe Quadrant, and Violet's father, Asher Daxton / Sorrengail.
So with the correct military ranking step in mind, now you can also start to chronologically order the places and subjects that he studied that we've gotten excerpts of so far. He likely studied Umbriel first, and he was second lieutenant and still Asher Daxton. Next, he studied Hedotus, and at that time he was a captain and had also become Asher Sorrengail, which means he married Lilith sometime after studying Umbriel, but before Hedotus. After that, he studied Zehyllna, and he was now a major and went by Asher Sorrengail. And then last, he studied feathertails in the Second Crowland Uprising with his research titled Subjugated, the Second Uprising of the Crowland People.
Oh, bless you for putting that together. All hail Queen Lorraine. I mean, poor Mill needs a new queen. I'm just saying, you know?
Could it be me? Maybe.
I think so.
I'm just kidding. All right. So the excerpt is out of the way, into the bulk of this chapter. Violet quickly realizes that the more vibrant foliage was likely due to the presence of magic, though she notes there's not enough to channel or wield despite feeling two strands of power trickling down the bonds from Terran and Andarna. I would definitely love to know how it is that Zehyllna has a trickle of magic, and more than the other major isles so far. We do get a little bit of information from the irids later on that give us possible ideas for how it happened, and we'll talk about it when we get there. But just wanted to note that for now. I love that everyone could finally talk to the dragons and griffins again because you can tell how relieved everyone was to finally be able to communicate. I thought it was funny that Traeger scratches Silaraine's jaw and Violet wonders how long she's had that particular itch since it's in a place that she can't reach.
Oh, Silaraine. Something about the scene was so heartwarming to me. We talked about this when Violet was trying to figure out the first passcode for her dad's research, the whole first love is irreplaceable. The bond between dragon and riders and griffin and flyers is unrivaled by any other, and I think that sentiment is echoed here, especially when Violet thinks, I give myself a second to smile, to revel in the happiness of my friends who have been denied the closest of their relationships for the last couple of weeks. And so it just really made me like, oh, they missed each other.
Yeah. As the amphitheater crowd settles in their seats, Violet is also especially relieved to be able to communicate mentally with Xaden again, and they waste no time doing so when she feels a wisp of shadow brush against her mind. While Xaden is relieved Zagael is speaking to him, even if it's only to point out his missteps, I found it quite ominous that he mentally makes Violet promise to never put herself between him and anyone else again because there's no telling what I could have done to you. Violet had also pointed out that he hadn't exactly been himself, and that to me feels like some small confirmation that it had actually been Venin temporarily when he'd grabbed Ferris back in Hedonis and also glared at Riddick.
I gotta be honest, I get where Xaden is coming from. When he goes to that weird Vaden place, I'm not actually entirely certain he could stop himself from hurting Violet. I really, really want to be on Team Violet here and go with the thought that Xaden or Vaden could never hurt her, but I really don't know anymore. My faith decreases a little more every time Xaden slips, and I ain't feeling good. And that's probably the theme of this episode. I ain't feeling good, guys.
I don't like it here.
I don't like it here. Holding our cardboard sign.
Yeah. The rest of the squad marvels at the crowd while Violet and Xaden begin mentally arguing about the limits of when Xaden would be deemed too dangerous and who gets to decide when he was, which basically is the usual for them.
I did think Violet made a good point when she said, "Which is it, Xaden? Am I too precious to get close, or am I the one who needs to know which shadow is yours?" I also think it's worth noting Violet seems to be the only one who can pull Xaden back when he goes back to the quote-unquote venin place. It really seems like Violet is damned if she does and damned if she doesn't in this situation. I also died a little inside when Traeger and Kat get to Violet and Xaden, and Traeger says, "This might be my favorite aisle." And on a reread, that line is devastating. I was like, no, Traeger, this will definitely not be your favorite aisle. I can promise you that.
It's going to be your last aisle. Oh, man. Gut punch. So Zehyllna's emissary arrives to meet them, and the woman introduces herself as Calixta, the mistress of today's activities. Notably, Arik also speaks fluent Zellish.
Zelnish? Okay. I don't know.
And once again, translates for a frustrated Dane.
This part had me cackling. Violet says, Dane replies slowly from my right, the words coming out like he's in pain. And then Arik just lets out a big sigh. He's like, and just like starts speaking it perfectly. And then it said, Dane looks ready to murder him. And I gotta be honest, it's like you did that once or twice, but a third time, really? And you still can't volunteer that information?
Ugh, crazy. I guess we shouldn't have been surprised to hear that Zehyllna was already aware that they'd be coming and that they'd want to secure an alliance. Violet realizes Cortland must have been the one to inform them because Calixta also immediately asks which dragon is the Irid. I found it interesting that though it doesn't seem like Calixta is super familiar, she definitely knows something about the dragons and griffins because she wasn't scared of Andarna, and instead says, she is marvelous. Our queen is delighted you've sought us out and is eager to come to your aid. We have always revered dragonkind and the griffins, of course. I would imagine that as an isle that favors Zihnal and interprets everything through the lens of luck, I wonder why they thought this would be lucky for them. And why was their queen so eager to help them without any negotiations whatsoever, aside from this initial test. Every other isle so far used a test just to grant an audience. But here, passing the test is enough for the queen to be like, here, take my army.
That's so true, because they didn't really negotiate or bargain or ask for basically anything in return. Yeah, I don't know. That's really strange. Man, this isle really is just pure chaos. I mean, The only thing I can think is maybe because they had weeks before the squad got there, maybe they had already discussed it and done whatever luck ritual, and they were like, it will be lucky for us to align with them. I don't know.
Right. Who knows? I guess that's kind of the point, though. One, it was lucky they showed up to Zehyllna, and two, passing the gifts test was enough to, prove to them that it was favorable to help them. So, I don't know. The one rule of the game to grant entrance to the city is this: accept whatever gift is presented without complaint, which sounds super easy. Psych. Because they did indeed have a little twisty little trick, just like all the other isles so far.
I thought it was interesting when Violet was communicating with Xaden about the game. He says, there's a trick here, but there's not enough power to read her. It seems like he had just enough power to sense something was off, but not enough magic to actually read her intentions. And I do wonder if he'd been able to do that would he have been able to see, I don't want to call it deceit because I don't think that's what's going on here. I don't think Calixta was like, we'll get one of them killed in our game, but he would have been able to better detect the potential for danger.
Yeah, that's a good point. Or like pick up on some unease or anxiety or something and then be able to be like, oh, okay, yeah, something bad's going to happen. I found it interesting that when Violet asks what happens if they complain, Calixta responds that they don't ally with anyone who doesn't accept that luck determines your fate, and they do not accept those who do not adjust their sails in a storm. In the direct context, this is meant to clarify the fact that they are testing how they handle disappointing or unexpected outcomes. But I do think it adds to the general sense that something much worse is yet to come. Not necessarily in this set of chapters, but just generically by the end of the book. And it's going to involve them needing to really change their strategy or their plans in order to overcome it. And then in terms of this set of chapters, it definitely foreshadows how they needed to adjust big time with the gifts, as we see very shortly. The squad agrees to play, and I also found it interesting that Arik translates, and when Violet asked him why he didn't help with translating the journals the previous year, he says, I was raised to be a diplomat. Diplomats don't speak to dead people. I'm just going to log that in our little book of possible signets, either for Arik or for other people later.
We know that was a very popular theory that Violet could speak to dead people, and that's why she could see Liam in Iron Flame. 99% of Rebecca Yarros has debunked that and said no.
She has,
but
yeah.
You never know. Maybe not for Violet, but for somebody else. Also, I totally forgot that Arik hasn't manifested a signet yet. That was like a big conversation, and I was like, oh yeah, it's March. That's really late. Like, is Arik gonna just implode?
I don't know. It has to come soon. Or maybe it already has, and we just don't know what it is yet.
Why wouldn't he say something?
And maybe it's like a
what if he's an intrinsic?
Yeah, I'm saying, because every time, like, nobody who has a signet that, like being an intrinsic or one that's related to something internal, like that you can't physically see.
Like mind wiping.
Exactly. I mean, you have no reason to tell anybody unless it like specifically comes up. And so
it's not like fire or ice where you can see a physical representation
exactly.
of it. Yeah.
So it's possible he's already got it and he just hasn't told anybody, but still waiting for that reveal. Alternatively, I do wonder if this is a callback to the fact that they call the languages of Lucerys, Moraine, and Tyrrendor dead languages, because when Navarre unified, those provinces lost their languages in favor of the common language, which was spoken in Chaldeer, Deaconshire, and Elsam originally. This only makes me more convinced that Lucerys, Moraine, and Tyrrendor specifically have some deep, buried history that we need to uncover. That's probably going to be super important. For this war or against the venin, I don't know, but you're starting to see this differentiation between the provinces come up or like become a bigger thing. So suspicious.
And rest assured, Lorraine will uncover it all.
I will. The game begins, and Calixta pulls out a deck of cards and states each of them will pull a card, and that card will correspond to a gift that each person will receive. One by one, they all draw, and it's made clear that not only can they not complain about their own gifts, but they also can't complain on behalf of anyone else either. Before we get into what everyone receives, I also wanted to note that Xaden tells Violet mentally that it's bad luck to throw away a gift from Zihnal. And that makes me feel like these gifts are definitely important in some way. As we said earlier, not sure if it's going to be symbolic importance or literal importance, but we'll definitely be thinking about the gifts and possible meanings.
I noted the exact same thing. Of course, it depends on the person and the gift, but I would be shocked if the gifts don't come into play literally or metaphorically for all of our characters. Because, I don't know, Rebecca does everything with intention. And I just think that this is all very intentional.
100%, yes. So Mira draws first, and her card gives her a bottle of wine. I was thinking perhaps this is for a celebration, or maybe it's sacred or related to sacrifice from like a religious perspective. Wine is also viewed as a gift from a god, so from that point of view, it has some literal symbolism.
There are really so many directions you could go with it. Maybe it's blessed, maybe it's poisoned. Maybe she and Violet will drink it and get super drunk. I don't know. I'm open to all of those possibilities.
So next, Marin receives 2 orange tunics. This one was another one that I didn't have a lot of thoughts for. The only thing I can think of is something for her younger brothers.
pretty much got nothing on that one. I thought maybe it would get used as part of a disguise later, but I don't know.
For some schemes?
Unless they're going to a pumpkin patch, I really don't know what they're going to do with 2 orange tunics, but you never know.
After that, Dane was the first to get done dirty when his card earns him a hard slap across the face. I don't know what this means, but maybe it was some sort of karma from stealing Violet's memory. I felt like he'd already made up for that, but maybe there is something else he will do later that is slap-worthy.
It had to be karmic punishment for his behavior in Fourth Wing. As you know, I'm a Dane defender, but I will say he was unfortunately annoying sometimes in Fourth Wing, and he was misguided. So maybe he did need a little slap just to wake him up from his bad choices. I also wanted to point out when Dane gets slapped, Violet warns Xaden not to laugh. And Xaden says, I'm more worried about the implications of that hit. I think what Xaden is picking up on here is that not all the gifts are quote unquote gifts. Some of them may be negative, which of course we know he was right. R.I.P. Traeger.
So after that, Garrick receives a rusted steel bucket. First of all, every time I think of rust, I think of tetanus. And I don't think that's related in any way, but it's just where my brain went first. But I guess religiously speaking, buckets can symbolize spiritual nourishment, aka drawing from the well of salvation, or like a generous blessing of some kind. So then I was wondering, could this mean Garrick will need some sort of salvation? And the fact that his bucket is rusted means it's been corroded, aka maybe he needs salvation because he becomes corroded later. It seems very ominous when I put it that way, and I don't like it. But,
I thought his gift was funny and useless. But now hearing this, I'm not feeling good. I'm feeling real worried.
Sorry to put a damper on.
Thank you for that.
Next, Auric gets a fractured hand mirror that immediately cuts his thumb. I feel like mirrors are often used symbolically to represent a person's view of themselves or reality. So a broken one could mean some sort of distortion of himself or reality. It could also mean like bad luck or the end of a past pattern.
When you start talking about broken mirrors, I started thinking about how symbolically that could mean bad luck. Like maybe he's going to have bad luck in the future, which is potentially foreshadowing since they are in the Isle of Zihnal. Maybe it's meant to also reflect a future version of himself that is broken. AKA, unfortunately, maybe he turns venin, his soul is fractured. You could go a lot of directions with that, but ultimately I feel like it's probably not a good omen.
Very few of these gifts were nice gifts, I will say.
I want a wine, a necklace, or a kitten. I'll take any of those 3.
Nothing else. So after that, Xaden gets an empty glass box the size of his foot, and it has pewter hinges and edges. Whenever I think of a glass box, I think of something being put on display. Glass boxes also often symbolize transparency and scrutiny, so something being open to the public and thus subject to scrutiny. We see this quite literally unfold in terms of Riddick finding out he's venin, and then Riddick's terms to keep the secret being that, Violet needs to tell the squad about that secret.
Ooh, that is excellent analysis.
I also, when I was kind of looking at glass box symbolism, it also states that they sometimes represent vulnerability and fragility. And maybe this connects back to how vulnerable Xaden is beneath his exterior mask. As we've gotten to know him through Violet's eyes, we see that Xaden carries a lot of pain and trauma from everything that he's been through.
The box also made me think of how when Violet is in pain, she always describes her coping strategy as putting the pain in a mental box. Very similar to what you said. Maybe this box is a physical representation of the pain Xaden carries around.
Oh.
I know. Also sad.
After this, Violet receives a black compass on a dark chain that turns out to be broken. The man that gives it to her tells her to use it wisely, which I thought was notable because none of the other people, like the Zehyllna attendants, said anything to whoever they gave a gift to.
At least that we're not privy to, so I would say, I think she's the only one. It's also described that he says it, his eyes blatantly mocking. Honestly, I took that as him just being an asshole because he knows he's giving her a useless piece of junk. But it is possible that it could mean something else. Like maybe he knows that it actually represents something about her future path. I don't know, but it was weird.
Yeah, I agree with that. He was like, gotcha.
Gotcha.
But not so fast, because we do have thoughts about this compass. So I actually don't think that this compass is broken. It may be for directional purposes or for like its literal functional use, but I feel like it's meant to lead to something specific. Maybe it will show Violet where to find answers, or it'll lead her home, aka to Xaden at some point. I don't know.
Ooh, that's interesting. I like the idea of home because Violet often refers to Xaden as home. We know that on a working compass, the arrow points north, but maybe this compass will lead Violet to something else, and I love that idea.
So Riddick receives his gift next, and he gets a big smacking kiss on each of his cheeks. And, Riddick did say his favorite god is Zihnal, and this is one of the better gifts. And actually, I wonder if Zihnal did protect Riddick in Hedotus because he just had good favor with Zihnal. But also, what if he's needed to protect Violet, so he had to stay alive? We see Riddick is 100% committed to Violet and the squad in chapter 43 later. So, I don't know.
I'm here for that. I like it. I also want to point out in chapter 16, specifically when they are all at the pub in Shantara, Riddick says, I personally prefer Zihnal. You can get through any situation with luck. Even though a few other of the Quest Squad members got good gifts, like Kat with a ruby necklace, something about this gift just seems to fit Riddick, and seems like Riddick is especially favored by Zihnal. As you said, he is quite lucky throughout the series so far.
Mm-hmm. So next, Kat is given a golden necklace with a dangling ruby. So obviously gem watch on that. But this is also one of the nicer gifts, comparatively speaking. And from initial impressions, perhaps this is meant to counteract the awful gift that Traeger gets. Or it could be some sort of foreshadowing for Kat's royal future.
That is definitely where my mind went. Royalty usually means wealth and jewels, and we know Kat is in line to the Peromish throne. And at the end of this set of chapters, we learn that she is one step closer, in fact.
Right. After this, Drake draws a card and receives a cute orange tabby kitten.
Aww.
I don't know what this one means. I can't figure out how it connects, but it is really cute. The only thing I could think of is that maybe it's meant to show that Drake needs to care for someone or something. I guess, like, aside from the kitten.
Mira.
What was that?
Did I say that out loud?
Yeah.
At this point, honestly, I was like, who cares? There's a cat. There's a kitten. So I don't care anymore about the analysis. Let's see the kitty.
Give it a cat. Yes. And then last, literally and figuratively, poor Traeger draws the arrow card. And before anyone can do anything, Traeger is shot through the heart with an arrow. Oh my God. When this happened, I was like, holy shit. This was just yet another sequence where Rebecca got us so good. But honestly, this sucks so bad. Traeger was the nicest soul. He was a healer. Him and Kat were developing this cute romantic relationship. And now he's dead.
He's dead.
I guess to think about the symbolic significance of his death, Traeger dying was very sad, but I wonder if the gift of his death was that because of it, they decided to go to a minor isle, and without them deciding to go do that, they would not have met the irids.
Which, was that really a good thing? Now that we're talking about it, like, was that really a gift? Yeah, I know, right? But I do like your analysis. I like that thought. It speaks to your idea you talked about in the beginning of the episode that your bad luck of burning your toast was actually good luck because it made you late and prevented you from getting in a car accident. Traeger's death ultimately led to something sort of good. We know it doesn't turn out well, but it was something that at least was needed and that they were wanting.
Right.
And who knows?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think by any means we can say we're done with the irids in our story. Maybe they'll have a change of heart. Something will happen. Ultimately, maybe the end will be good with the irids. I would assume so. I can't believe that we wrote 3 books
would meet them and
to learn about irids and then
never meet them again.
Yeah.
That would be really lame if that was the case. Hopefully it's not. So that ends chapter 38. Moving on to chapter 39, the excerpt. This was another part of Major Asher Sorengale's research on Zehyllna. He simply says, sometimes the best gift the god of luck could give is his absence. I don't have much analysis for this. It definitely definitely feels like this was meant to point out that gifts, quote unquote, can be both good and bad. We see that perhaps without Zihnal and going to Zehyllna, Traeger would still be alive.
This happens rarely, but I think this excerpt is pretty on the nose with the events of the chapter. So not a ton to analyze and theorize about
Pick
here.
apart. Yeah. All right. So in terms of the events, we get a metaphorical slowing of time as everyone processes the tragedy that just occurred. Unfortunately, like every other damn time something tragic happens, no one has time to grieve. Violet immediately feels a wave of grief and guilt, feeling responsible for Traeger's death, but Xaden shouts down the bond, saying, I can't do this for you. I wish I could, but they know you're in command. This scene, I think, was really well written and just like reading through everyone's reactions. And then when Silaraine died too, I was like, you could feel the moment in a very sad way.
Yes. You could really feel everyone's shock. I agree. Also, I know I said this earlier, but why did Silaraine's death make me cry more than Traeger's? You know what it is? It's that description of like Silaraine took stumbling steps forward as if she could make it to Traeger. And it was the same thing when Liam and Day died.
Yes.
Like when Liam's like, take me to Day. And I'm like, no, they just want to be together. Yes. I hated that. Oh, and then how I think it's Carolaire is like trying to hold Silaraine up, and you're just, oh man, now I want to cry. I want to cry right now. Oh man. Ooh, let's keep it moving. Let's move on from this, okay? It happened. There's nothing we can do.
So Violet kind of shakes herself back into the present, and it gave me chills when she thinks, I lift my chin before bowing my head and expel another piece of my humanity. She says, thank you, and then thinks, fuck them.
Agreed. Retreat.
It's crazy that this entire trip and expedition has been to help humanity on the continent, and yet every isle has required them to kind of set aside a piece of their humanity in one way or another to pass a test or get the information that they need. It's crazy. You would have to thank someone for killing your friend. Like, that is some BS.
Lorraine, I would never thank anyone for killing you. I'd be like, fuck your army.
Absolutely.
Okay? I would be like, Taryn and Andarna, burn it down. Burn
dagger
it
to the throat.
down.
Dagger to the heart.
Immediate dagger.
Yeah.
Yes. Daggers are flying everywhere. I would never thank anyone for your death.
I wouldn't for you either.
Thank you.
Never.
I do remember when for a fleeting moment, I thought this isle might be the best and or at least the easiest isle. Instead, comparatively, this isle had possibly the worst outcome. Although they did secure an army, which this is the only isle they actually secured anything useful. So, I don't know. I really can't decide.
All these isles, man. Should never have gone to any of them. What was Mira's words? She said it was a... What did she say?
Fool's errand.
Yeah, a fool's errand.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
True that. So several hours later, the squad rests, having spent the day either negotiating or searching for Andarna's kind around the isle. Surprise, surprise, the irids are not on Zehyllna, and Violet is faced with her ever-increasing anxiety over the consequences of returning to Navarre without them.
I think Violet's thoughts here really showed that when she originally set out on the mission, she never actually contemplated what would happen if they weren't successful. She never really allowed herself to entertain the thought. But now I think she's really starting to question not only the mission, but herself as well. And I think we're starting to see the reality of failure or the potential for failure set in here.
Ultimately, Zehyllna agreed to an initial advance party followed by 40,000 troops when they are ready for them. This is some good news, at least, but Kat and Marin are preoccupied with how to honor Traeger and Scylla's bodies. Kat insists that they burn the bodies on one of the uninhabited minor isles to make sure that no one tries to dig up their bones. I totally sympathize with Kat, and I agreed with her when she said, we can get back to all the good this is doing us after we burn them. I think they're worth losing a few days off schedule.
It also really broke my heart when Violet was thinking of all the other flyers, and then she thinks, and I'll have to tell Rhi I lost Traeger when she's worked so hard to keep us all alive. We know the squad has really prided themselves on staying together and alive, and something about that realization just really devastated me because Rhi does work so hard. Rhi is such the mother of the group. She's always chasing the first years and making sure they're practicing and everyone's eating their vegetables and practicing their signets. And that's just so sad that all of Rhi's hard work for naught.
I know. And it wasn't anything that she could control either because, they were totally, nobody could. But the squad wasn't together and bad things happen when the squad's not together. Violet agrees, and they plan to stop in on our Traeger and Scylla first, and then search the surrounding minor isles before continuing on to Loisum later. I also noted when Kat says they're running out of isles, and Violet responds, that means we have to be close. The minor isles in Loisum bore the edge of every map we have. This was definitely some foreshadowing for them actually finding the irids, or I guess more like the irids finding them, as we see. Later on, the squad rests for the night, and Violet confides in Xaden over her disappointment in herself and her grief over Traeger. While the topic of this sequence is very tragic, I do appreciate that Violet and Xaden take comfort in each other. We've really seen how they both take turns in playing supportive roles for each other, as good partners should. I had a couple quotes that I liked. My first one was, everyone in leadership loses someone under their command. You pulled yourself together and completed the mission. Because, I mean, truly, they are at war. Death is a part of war. And unfortunately, you can't stop and just abandon the mission or whatever it is, which is really unfortunate. And then the second one that I really liked is when he tells her, I hate to break it to you, but you were selected by a general among dragons. You can choose to step into leadership or he can drag you. Either way, you're going to end up in front. I think that was just kind of like a reality check moment of, you know, she just kind of, even if she doesn't necessarily want to be in that position, she just has to embrace it because she is going to end up in that position because of Taryn.
Something I've really enjoyed about this book is the development of Xaden and Violet's relationship. They've really started to settle into being a solidified couple, and I just really like these moments between them.
Yeah.
Not as much hot and heavy as I'd like, but I'll settle for this, you know? Something else I thought was notable in this conversation is when Xaden says, what they never tell us in the quadrant is that rank is well and good, but you and I both know that the moment we fly onto the battlefield, it isn't the humans giving commands. The relationship between dragons and humans has been an ever-growing conversation on this podcast. The question of do dragons control humans or do humans control dragons is one that I'm really starting to wonder about. This was notable in Iron Flame between Varish and his dragon, as well as Jack Barlow and his dragon Bade. I do wonder if as we progress through the series, likely in future books, if there's going to be an ever-growing tension and even potentially infighting between dragons and humans, and perhaps between the Navarian riders and Oratian riders and their dragons as well. I feel like there's this subtle undertone of like a C or D plot about do humans control dragons or vice versa. And I think this conversation is echoing that sentiment because sure, Melgren's in charge of the humans, but like Taryn, as Xaden said, is a general, right? And when they fly in formation, all the dragons follow Taryn's lead. And so by proxy, you know, they're following Violet. And so I just thought that was kind of interesting when you think about it and how that will play out when push comes to shove, like rank versus dragon power and how all of that comes into play.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I mean, I think ideally a rider and a dragon work cooperatively for the same goal. And I think when both sides have aligned visions and goals, that's probably the case with both riders and dragons. Yeah. But we've also seen many examples of like, even when Taryn first bonded Violet, he was forcing her to make decisions. He's like, no, I'm going to keep you in the seat. And like, we're like, okay, yeah, whatever. Great for Violet. She can stay on Taryn and she can stay bonded to him because he chose that. But like you said, I think if there's ever a point where humans and dragons differ on how they should approach a situation or how they feel about how to solve a problem or whether to do anything about a problem, I could definitely see that becoming a problem in terms of, are humans going to be able to do anything, you know?
Yeah, feels like not.
They don't even have power without the dragons, so...
Oh, true.
So, yeah. I think we've seen Violet step into her own individual power with her signet and her unique skill set thanks to her scribe training. But she is now transitioning to the idea of leading others, not just herself. And I think leadership is an entirely different skill set, and I think we'll continue to see how Violet grows in this role as the series progresses.
Retweet.
The chapter
Very
ends
true.
with Xaden's cryptic assurance that Violet will have to be better than him to protect Tyrandor because there is no cure for me. That's why you have to become better than me. There's only you. Between this comment and what the irids tell them, it really does make you doubt whether or not there actually is a cure. I still want to hold on to hope, and I love that Violet tells him, I'll stand by your side. Between Andarna's kind and the research we're compiling about dark wielders will cure you. But you do really start to question the possibility of finding a cure.
Yup. At the beginning of this book, I was very confident there would be a cure. Now, I didn't actually think we would cure Xaden in this book. I thought that it would end on Violet having a big revelation of what the cure is, and then a lot of book 4 would be about getting the quote-unquote ingredients, for lack of a better term. But to be honest, Rebecca has basically been telling us from the beginning there is no cure, there is only control. And I'm really starting to believe her. And I actually don't think there will be a cure. I'm like tentatively planting my flag in that camp, not just in this book, but in future books.
Oh.
Yeah, I really am not thinking so. I can't
not
say
willing
with
to
any
give
confidence.
up yet.
I am.
I'm not willing to give up yet because this is what everybody's saying, but also nobody fucking knows anything. Plus, we have the dragons being shady about what they know. There's barely any research about the venin out there. So until all possible paths have been pursued, I'm not ready to be like, there's no cure.
I just don't know what paths are left.
I kind of think it might be related to the gods, and I have more thoughts about this later. But yeah, anyways, that ends chapter 39. Moving on to chapter 40, the excerpt. We get another public notice, and it's number 634.23. It was transcribed by Percival Fitzgibbons. The notice states that conscription rates will be doubled for each province until further notice. So first of all, this was likely just declared in the current timeline because A, the number before the decimal is 634, aka probably 634 AU. And B, with the impending war with the venin, it makes sense Navarre would boost conscription to build up their army. This sounds great, and I'm sure having more soldiers is helpful to some degree, but ultimately, I feel like what they really need is to fix the wards, and they need more riders and dragons specifically. But we also know that every year they have fewer dragons willing to bond. So that kind of puts a damper on the optimism. Unless they find another weapon that is as effective as Dragon's Insignia power. Basically, everything is dire. They are running out of time because the wards are quite literally the only thing keeping them alive at this point. But those damn irids aren't gonna help. At least not now.
I agree with all of your analysis. This excerpt made me start thinking about the overall political landscape of Navarre at the moment. And I started thinking about what, if any, political ramifications this will have. I imagine being conscripted is not super popular to begin with, and then just all of a sudden doubling them probably means provinces are essentially going to have to force people into Basgiath. Not necessarily in the Rider's Quadrant, but probably a lot into the infantry. Gotta be honest, I would be pretty pissed if my king and military leadership hit a secret war with soul-sucking dark builders from me, and when they got found out, they were like, oops, sorry about that. Yeah, we're gonna need you to send basically all of your sons and daughters to a death college to help with the war effort. Okay, thanks, and it's mandatory. I do wonder what the political ramifications will be in Navarre, and I feel like it's not going to be good. I feel like it's going to create a lot of unrest and tension.
I am kind of curious about how other parts of the military are being prepared.
Mm-hmm.
We've only really seen about riders and dragons, and that's kind of the most effective thing that they have that we know of, aside from like alloyed weapons. But I'm like, are you planning to arm all of your infantry soldiers with alloy daggers? I don't want to say it's pointless, but I'm kind of like, it feels a little pointless to put them in infantry. You're just putting them in danger, you know what I mean?
Just like cannon fodder. I think that's ultimately the goal would be to arm everybody as much as humanly possible. I think if they could, they would give everybody 50 alloy daggers. So I think they're working towards that. It just takes time. We'll think about that later.
We'll think about that later. Yeah. The next morning, the squad heads northwest with only the hope that the maps they were following were drawn correctly. By the middle of the night, they finally find a tiny uninhabited isle. Notably, Violet thinks, I'm pretty sure the sand is black, and it seems like they did need to thank Zihnal because Violet feels power ripple through her and energy crackle along her skin with about half the intensity that it does in Navarre.
Hey, you take that back. On this podcast, we no longer thank Zihnal. We thank Amari, and that's it because we're done with Zihnal for now. Take it back.
You're right. Well, I'll hold on to Zihnal purely for Riddick's sake.
I guess.
And that is all.
But if anything happens to my boy Riddick, Zihnal is done for, okay? You better look out.
This probably isn't super important because it's about colors, but the color of the ocean around this isle is described as the blackest shade of blue, and the sand is also described as looking black. I don't have any formal thoughts about it, but I am just noting it in case there is an important reason for this later.
Well, we do know there is a correlation between the intensity of colors and the presence of magic. And given the irids are close by, I think that it's worth noting.
But more importantly, there is magic. Obviously, it's not as strong, but it's stronger than it was on Zehyllna. The squad quickly gathers fresh water, and then they make a pyre of wood to burn Traeger and Silaraine's bodies. Drake states, "With honor, love, and gratitude, we commend your souls to Malik." I kind of forgot about Malik for a bit, but we know that for those who worship Malik, it's encouraged to burn the items of deceased people to honor him. And there's the whole, he who does not burn for Malik will be burned by Malik statement. I actually have been waiting to see if Malik comes into play in a bigger plot-related way, mostly in relation to souls and possibly the venin. I realize this is a little bit of a tangent, but the venin lose their souls, so they spiritually die, quote unquote, but they don't physically die. And I wonder how a death god feels about that. Gonna therapize Malik. I would imagine that the gods dislike the venin too, but I also realize, that's probably not a very godly thing to say. But I am but a mere human trying to put myself in the mind of a god. So they probably don't like it. They don't like that somebody's trying to play their role.
Yeah, that's fair. Well, and not only did I kind of forget about Malik, I also forgot about Loyal. We know at the end of this set of chapters, they go back to Basgiath and they never make it to Loisum, which we will talk about more when we get there. But, maybe a little trip to the Isle of Love would have not been too bad. Maybe it would have been a nice, relaxing, happy visit.
The next morning, the squad briefly argues about where they are, and there were a couple notable things. First and foremost, the kitten is still with them, and Drake named it Broccoli. It's kind of very cute, but a little bit random. And I love that Mira was like, "Give me that." And, everybody thinks that she's talking about the maps, but actually she just wanted a kitten. I also thought it was really funny that Mira asked, "Why not carrots?" And then Drake responds, "Just to frustrate you, soaring gale." Yes to this flirting.
Oh my gosh. Yes to Drake and Mira flirting. Yes to kittens. Yes to broccoli. Yes to all of this. But also, I am with Mira. Why not carrots? Or pumpkin? Pumpkin's cute. Other orange things. Why broccoli? I will say I am absolutely delighted and relieved to know what this is. Obviously, we do our best to avoid spoilers, but I've seen a lot of references to broccoli. I didn't know what it was, but people kept talking about broccoli. And I'm like, what does broccoli have to do with Onyx Storm? I was so confused. Or what is broccoli? Honestly, I was like, is there like a notable scene with vegetables? I don't know. So I'm glad to know. We'll finally be in the know about broccoli.
They better protect broccoli at all costs.
My God. That was my other thought. I'm like, Rebecca Yarros better not introduce us to a baby kitten and then be like, kitten dead. I will not allow this. She better
never. Broccoli forever. Broccoli to the end. So also, as they orient themselves to the map and figure out where they are, it's eventually confirmed by Taryn that they are at the southern tip of an island chain of volcanic formations. It does not match anything, though there is another massive land, an hour's flight due west with what appears to be sizable cliffs. For some reason, this triggered a memory of when Andarna said, "I'm not fond of pits" at the end of Iron Flame in this guy's Wardstone chamber. We also know that Andarna's fire can kill venin. And I was like, pits, fires, volcanoes? Do the irids possibly have hatching grounds, or do they live in volcanoes or volcanic areas? We see that the irids don't live on this isle, so where do they actually live?
That's a great question. It's meant that there are hundreds of them, and dragons aren't exactly small, so it has to be a large enough area to accommodate hundreds of dragons. My guess would be a quote-unquote minor isle, but one that has quite a bit of space.
Right. If it's just like a chain of islands, maybe just in and around all of them, like they're kind of just spread out or something. But I would love to know, though. Violet gives out orders to search as many of the surrounding small islands as they can, and she splits everyone off into 5 groups to search different sections. I thought it was hilarious that everyone is astounded that Violet does not pair up with Zayden, and Garrick tells him, "Just you and me today, honey bear."
Thank the gods Garrick didn't die, because he always pops in with these one-liners that just take me out, and I need Garrick in my life. I need him, I need Riddick for the comedic relief they provide.
I wish we got a little more lines or scenes with Garrick in them. He's always just kind of there, but we don't hear from him.
Yeah, he's just there. He's just always there.
He's just there. Yeah. Violet and Riddick agree to keep watch until the fire burns out, and then after everyone splits, she checks in with Xaden. I thought it was interesting that one of the reasons Violet split from pairing with Xaden is because she realizes that she is a trigger for him to channel power. Xaden says, "You're not a trigger, you're the only thing I can't fathom losing. Wielding to protect you has always been an instinct, but now it's uncontrollable."
Okay, literally hearing you read that, I rolled my eyes again and I rolled my eyes so hard when he said that because he is quite literally proving Violet's point. If Violet is in danger and the urge to protect her is now uncontrollable, it means Xaden will do anything in his power, including channeling from the earth to do it. So he is quite literally proving Violet's point with his words.
Also, unofficial mate theory plug here. Again, not saying that there's mates here, but our little thing about, something weird. Something weird is going on.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways, he then follows that by stating, "I mean it when I say you own my soul. You're the only place I feel completely like me anymore." This just continues to feed into our theory about some kind of deeper bond existing between Violet and Xaden, but this does confirm that there is an even stronger drive for Xaden to protect Violet now that he's venin, which is interesting. It kind of goes against what you'd expect. Like a typical venin seems to just become consumed with greed for more power. They don't have any concern for anyone else as they lose their soul/humanity. But for Xaden, we know that Violet is quite literally, to use a religious term, his salvation, and his veninness increases his drive to protect her. So then I started thinking a little bit about the term salvation. And I feel like that feels particularly relevant knowing what we now know up to this point. So in a religious context, it typically refers to the deliverance of a person's soul from sin and its consequences, often achieved through faith in a divine being or deity. And when you think about that, in conjunction with Violet being partially dedicated to Dune, a goddess, it does make you wonder if maybe that is going to be related to Xaden's cure in the end. We've already discussed that love as a concept seems like it's going to play a major role in some way plot-wise, but I'm getting a stronger sense that the gods perhaps will potentially be a key to curing Xaden. We've made so many comparisons to Xaden feeling somehow connected to the gods, but I don't think it quite clicked for me until now how significant it really is that Violet was partially dedicated to Dune, and that undeniably connects her to the gods, but we just don't know to what degree or how that's going to affect her in the future, I guess. I don't know why I didn't think about that harder until now, but I don't think we're done with dedication either.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I feel like there's more to learn because, well, it's about the gods. We keep getting them introduced. We feel like they're going to come into play in a bigger way. We learn that she's dedicated. We've had all these like descriptive comparisons of characters and their relation to gods. We kind of stopped thinking about them temporarily, but I'm still like, something's up with them. So
well, I think we can all agree on that.
I know, but not like symbolically anymore. Like I am half flag plant.
Oh, you're full flag, baby. You are full flag.
Okay, fine. I'm a full flag. I'm a full flag planter on this idea that we're going to get live action with the gods in true form. Yeah.
Ooh,
Yes,
I don't know. I will not be planting my flag on that hill today. I'm going to hold it and stare at you and kind of weigh my options a little bit more and just think about it for a while.
You'll have a stick, but no flag.
A stick, but no flag. Yeah.
Anyways, I digress. Everyone takes off, leaving Violet and Riddick on the beach. Per usual, Cairn, the curmudgeon, is grumpy that he is separated from Zehyllna, and he says, "I'll say the same when you've been unable to communicate with your mate for weeks and are then deprived by choice." Still believe that the use of the term mate is just him using dragon terms to describe the relationship, but we'll just note it, just in case.
Just in case.
I also loved that we get a little glimpse into Riddick and Atrum's relationship because we really don't know much about the other riders and their dragons. And they're just so goofy, but it also makes perfect sense that they play pranks on each other because Riddick, typically is the jokester. So it's hilarious that his dragon is also the same way.
I sometimes forget how selective dragons are and that they pick their riders very carefully. So of course, it makes perfect sense that Atrum is extremely playful like Riddick. I kind of forget that dragons are just like people in the sense that they have very distinct personalities. We really only get insight into Taryn and Andarna and a little bit Zehyllna. And I forget that not all dragons are sassy, curmudgeon-y, or just straight up vicious. Maybe they can actually experience joy and be playful and be happy. And so that was a nice insight into the idea that dragons can be other things besides vicious killers.
If I ever have a dragon, I want Riddick and Atrum's relationship for being my dragon.
Oh, yeah. I need a funny dragon because I'm a funny bitch, okay? I need a funny dragon.
So Riddick leaves to change into dry clothes, thanks to Atrum. And now it's time for the big scream moment. The ground starts to shudder. Violet gets blasted in the face with some sulfurous hot air. And then the air before her glimmers and then solidifies into gleaming sky blue scales between two enormous nostrils.
Ah!
I didn't think it was funny that when Violet first calls for Taryn, he's like, sorry, I'm busy with curmudgeonly things. But when she really yells at him, then he's like, oh shit, I'm coming.
I'm telling you, this is a freaking thing. We could make this a drinking game for the Empyrean series, and we would be so drunk. Taryn is never there when Violet is in trouble. He's always like, I'm 5 minutes out, stay alive until I get there.
Yeah.
I'm like, it is uncanny how he always disappears. And then the moment he's gone, Violet gets attacked by venin in the ribosatchet. The irids show up. It's always something.
I agree with that.
Drives me crazy.
Ultimately, a group of 6 dragons with varying scale tones revealed themselves, and the irids found them, not the other way around. And at this point, obviously on a first read, I was screaming. I was so excited to finally meet the irids. Ugh.
That disclaimer of on a first read is really important.
On a first read, yeah.
Because I too felt the same way. I was like, it's about damn time. And then by the end of it, I was like, oh, maybe I didn't want to meet the irids.
Interestingly, one of the irids makes a slide whistle sound and then speaks to Violet to say, hello, human. So crazy that they found them. Typically, dragons don't talk to humans unless it's their bonded rider, but irids do, apparently. And specifically, they use this slide whistle sound as some sort of magical communication link. I'll admit, I found that a little bit weird. I guess I can't say I had any idea how that was going to happen or what magic would allow them to talk with humans. But I think I just kind of figured that if they wanted to talk to them, they just would. I didn't think there was going to be a slide whistle or anything like that involved.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Aside from that, it seems like the slide whistle thing is unique to irids, right?
I would think so. However, we don't really get any other examples of other dragons attempting to talk to humans. The only other instance I can think of is when Violet talks to Coda at the end of Iron Flame, but we actually aren't privy to that conversation. So it's possible that only Violet speaks to Coda and Coda just listens and basically nods yes or no. So I would think so.
But yeah, that ends chapter 40. Moving on to chapter 41, the excerpt. This one was from Colonel Kaori's Field Guide to Dragonkind, and it states that they know basically nothing about dragons. And I was like, well, it's about time we get that admission, and ain't that the truth? We've been pointing out how sus the dragons have been, and I just need them to fully reveal what the heck is going on, because it's just so obvious that they know so much more, but they refuse to tell anybody anything.
The more I read this, the less convinced and confident I am in my knowledge base of Dragonkind and the Empyrean in general. I know we've talked about this, but for a series that is quite literally called the Empyrean series, we know basically nothing about dragons. And you have to remember that we have such a limited perspective. We only get Violet's POV. And so we're only getting insight into her relationship with Taryn and Andarna. To be honest, I don't trust Taryn or Andarna to always be reliable narrators. I don't think they're evil, and I do think they love Violet and would do anything to protect her and all that. But their relationship was built on a foundation of lies. I mean, Taryn kept the secret of venin from Violet all the time. They're like, we had to wait until you figured it out. And it's like, okay, but maybe you could have just said something. Yes, at this point, why? We are literally fighting so that dragonkind and humans can stay alive. And you're like, you must figure it out on your own. Bitch, we don't have time for that anymore.
We don't.
Ooh, see, already
Ain't
getting
nobody
heated.
got time for that.
Already getting heated here, okay?
Anyways, Violet and Riddick immediately freak out because these dragons are speaking to them. But y'all just wait, because this was a huge chapter with many important things to discuss. Apparently, arrogance is universal among them. When a female irid says, perhaps the female lacks intelligence, in response to Violet not responding at first. So, first of all, Violet asks if they speak our language, meaning the human common language, and the male irid says, we are magic. And I was like, they say what? Does this mean they have their own magic, as in no need to channel from the earth? Could this also mean they are the reason magic exists in areas? Will they imbue an area with magic? Touching back on the did magic come first or did dragons bring the magic question we've been asking. Also, does this count as confirmation that Andarna does not channel magic from the earth? She has her own magic and therefore has to have been the reason Violet was able to wield in Umbriel and remain in communication with both Taryn and Violet throughout all their travel to different isles.
I pretty much took this as confirmation of our theory. I think it's important to note that he doesn't say we have magic. He says
True.
We are magic. And so I took that at face value, essentially saying that irids are a source of magic in and of themselves. And I think that sentiment is echoed later in the conversation when one of the irids says something like, you have magic and look what you've done with it. You've made yourself a weapon. And so the implication being that they can do a lot with their magic. And so, yeah, I think they are themselves sources of magic. I don't know how you could take it any other way when one of them is literally saying, hey, we are in fact magic.
I know, but this is another one of my slight qualms with the way that information is confirmed or revealed to us. I feel like it's always done in this like little way where you're still
like, what does it really
unsure,
mean?
Right? Or it's not a big reveal, like
a laissez-faire, yeah,
right,
or
right.
laissez-faire. I think
it's just kind of subtle in a way.
Yeah.
And so then I end up questioning it because it was subtle.
Yeah, you're like, is this valid? Because it should have been a big deal. And they're like, oh yeah, that's just world building. Hello.
Anyways, okay. The irids confront Andarna, recognizing her as a fellow irid, and she responds, I am irid, while shifting the colors of her scale. Riddick is shocked by Andarna, and Violet adds, I think when they make that whistle sound, it connects you to the irids. So, as a follow-up, Andarna does not need to slide whistle to communicate with Violet because she has bonded her, but would Andarna need to do the slide whistle thing to communicate with other humans? Also, it's a bit weird that if irids are magic, why do they... Clearly, I was like very fixated on the slide whistle thing. And I was like, if you are a magic and you can just do whatever, why do you have to have this slide whistle thing? Like, I don't understand.
Oh my God.
Not relevant whatsoever, but I'm like very fixated on this for some reason.
Maybe it's a politeness thing, just to let you know, hey, we're about to be in your head. We know they're unfailingly polite. I don't know. Either way, I think your logic tracks that the bond between a dragon and rider establishes a permanent line of communication, so they don't need to, quote unquote, activate any kind of magic to communicate with them. But for someone like Riddick, if Andarna wanted to talk to him, then she would have to do her, like, whistle. I was trying to do a whistle sound. It didn't work at all. I don't even know, what is a slide whistle? I don't actually know what that is.
I have no idea what it is either. I should have Googled it, but...
Yeah, I'm going to look that up later.
Side quest after recording. So the irid questions why Andarna chooses black as her resting color, and then notably one of the irids says she is the Criterion, and this will be explained later.
I think it's also worth noting when one of the irids says that, it's described that the 5 others cringe backwards. And that seems to indicate from the get-go that this is not going to go well.
At this point, Taryn lands, and I did note that it's described when he lands, it shakes the ground like thunder, and this feels notable in relation to the Irid's comments about the magic dragons give to their riders later. Things are very tense, to say the least. Taryn is defensive, Violet doesn't know what the Irids will do, and Andarna, bless her little dragon heart.
Bless her heart. Bless her heart. Andarna!
She insists that they are her family. Despite the arrogant comments that the Irids make, we do see that they are willing to be polite. For example, they agree to call Andarna her name instead of Irid, and they actually apologize. But they do assure them that they only want to speak to Andarna. The next thing I found interesting is how surprised the irids were that Andarna no longer has a feather tail, and they ask them what they did to her. Violet notes that all 6 of the irids each still have a feather tail, and we will circle back to this when the irid named Leothan stays back to talk with Violet, but for now, it seems that irids keep their feather tails as they mature as well. The irids go on to ask Andarna how she chose her scorpion tail, and this leads into her retelling her story, and basically we get a little Fourth Wing Iron Flame recap. Of course, they skip over everything Andarna may have heard or known prior to presentation in Fourth Wing, which was highly annoying to me.
Oh my God, I know. I know the exact same thing. As soon as Andarna started talking about when she was in her egg, and all of a sudden it's cut off and Riddick is like, oh, we're going to be here a while. I was immediately enraged. They always do this shit. They always do this to us.
But the irids begin asking questions regarding presentation and Navarian dragon culture, and a couple things are clear. First, the irids are appalled that dragons would burn humans, which is kind of funny. We know threshing as threshing, but a female irid asks, why do you participate in harvest? And that to me indicates that they know of it, but I wonder why they call it something different. So then I started doing some Googling. Threshing is typically associated with agriculture, and it means separating the grain from the plant. Biblically speaking, it is used as a metaphor to mean judgment and revelation. And interestingly, the harvest floor refers to God separating the righteous from the wicked. Harvest is the act of collecting various resources in relation to agriculture, but biblically speaking, it also refers to the culmination of God's work, the gathering of souls, and the result of human action. I do find the distinctions interesting because for threshing, there is more judgment involved in terms of the dragons deciding who is worthy, who is not, while for the irids, calling it a harvest feels kind of more neutral. Like it seems like they are more just objectively viewing the humans from the outside. In a way, learning what we do about the irids, I guess it makes perfect sense since the irids do choose to remain neutral with everyone, and they kind of take this like higher up position of judgment. They're not getting involved, but they're still observing everything that's going on and then, making separate observations from that vantage point. Aside from that, both of these things do sort of lead me to wonder if dragons are kind of like gods, or are they gods as well in a way? To be perfectly honest, they do provide godlike things like granting powers or determining worthiness. When they were in Umbriel, the priestess was like, it seems like you worship somebody new now, and she like pointedly looks up at the other dragons when she's talking to Violet. And so I'm just noting it here, and I found it kind of interesting. The next major point of concern for the irids revolves around the fact that Andarna bonded as a juvenile and then used her juvenile gift for a human when she slowed time.
It broke my heart when the irid yells at Andarna, you bonded as a juvenile, and Taryn jumps in to defend her, and Andarna tells Taryn, do not ruin this for me. It's described, hurt stabs through the bond, and Taryn recoils, his head drawing back. Let's be honest, Taryn is basically Andarna's father, and I think this makes him feel like she doesn't value him in that way, and it just made me so sad because Taryn is doing the thing that he's best at, which is protecting the ones he loves.
That's true.
And Andarna's just like, don't ruin this for me. And I don't know, it just made me sad. I'm like, don't hurt Taryn's feelings.
She wanted to make a good impression, I think,
I know.
And so she just didn't want anybody to scare them off.
I know she's just a teenager and kids do things and say things to their parents, but still.
Andarna defends her decision, and I love that she said, she is part of me as I am of her. You undervalue our connection. And I was like, oh, she loves Violet so much.
The irid then apologizes, and I was cracking up when Riddick signed, damn, this breed apologizes. Maybe we should have held out.
I know. This also leads Andarna to ask if irids bond with humans, but they respond, we do not live with humans. And I was like, that was not a direct answer. I think it leaves room for the possibility, though. Based off the rest of the convo, it feels like they would only bond if absolutely necessary and if a human showed the change they were hoping to see since the Great War. Somehow they got involved with the original wardstones and everything, so whether that was something that they did without bonding to somebody, not sure, but they're evading a direct answer, and that's what I found suspicious. We also learned that there are hundreds hundreds of irids, and Violet also notices a similar swirl pattern on one of the male irids' horns to Andarna's and thinks maybe they're from the same den. I am pretty sure we learn later that this irid that she's talking about is Leothin. I'm not entirely sure about dragon genetics here because we know nothing, but could it be that Leothin is related to Andarna?
Oh, I can't say firmly, absolutely yes, but I do not think that's a detail we should overlook. It's mentioned more than once, and I think it's mentioned for a reason. And I think it's also notable that Leothin was the one irid who wanted to stay behind to ask more questions and was more open to, I don't want to say forgive, but understanding the context. Yes, absolutely. Yes. And so I don't think that's all coincidental.
Andarna continues her story, next getting into war games and resin, and she just thought she was impressing them with her story. But we can clearly tell that the irids do not approve of what she has become. They actually gasp when Andarna reveals that Violet channeled her power prematurely, forcing her into the dreamless sleep. After the whole story, Andarna gets to the main point of their mission to ask the irids whether they know how the venin were defeated during the Great War or if they knew a cure for them. And she also just wants to know her family.
Andarna!
By the time the irids demand to examine Andarna's lesser developed wing, it is obvious that they are not happy. All of this was just really sad, and you're also kind of getting a little bit of like, I don't think it's secondhand embarrassment, but it's a little bit like
guilt.
You're like,
shame.
she's like going and going and going, but you can tell obviously that the irids do not like what they're hearing, but she keeps going and going, and you're like, no.
Yes. I mean, it's hard to watch someone you love making a mistake and they're so unaware of what's happening. You have this bird's eye perspective. You want to stop them, but they're just committing to what they're doing, and you're just like, oh God, I can't do anything to help you.
She was so proud, and she just wants their approval so bad. It was heartbreaking to read. Yeah.
As I mentioned before, I listened to the audiobooks. The narrator is Rebecca Soler, and the way she reads this scene, you can just hear the desperation and anxiety in Andarna's voice, and it just makes you want to cry.
Yeah.
Her pitch gets slightly higher, and she's talking faster and faster, and she's like, but wait, and you're just like, no.
So the irids leave to discuss privately, and when they return, turns out Violet is the one that failed their test. And this was another twisty twist. Andarna, of course, jumps in to defend Violet, stating Violet loves me. But they all get a huge reality check when the irid responds, she uses you. She took advantage of a vulnerable child. She used your power as an instrument of warfare. Forced your premature growth, and look what you have become.
Ugh, that hurts to hear spelled out.
I know. I will say they have a small point. Violet may not have known Andarna was still a baby when she bonded her, but, after that, she did know, and she did use her power. Of course, those were both very dire circumstances where, had she not used it, Violet and many other people would have died. So
yes and no. I would definitely say at least the first time when Violet is attacked in her bedroom, she has no idea that Andarna can do that. And she really had no idea what the fuck was happening. So I definitely don't hold Violet accountable on that use case.
Right.
However, the second go around, I don't know. Because if Violet wouldn't have done it, then they all would have died. And it's hypothetically possible Violet's death could have caused Andarna's. So it's really just a weird situation. And of course, since Violet knows nothing about feather tails and baby dragons or anything in their gifts, she didn't know that she could pull so much power from her, she could force Andarna into the dreamless sleep. I think if Violet knew that, she wouldn't have done it despite the circumstances. I really do think that.
Right. I also simultaneously really disliked them for saying this about Andarna because the irids left Andarna there with no support. They treated her purely as an experiment, which in my opinion is no better than turning her into a weapon. But she grew up with these dragons who live life differently, and you're surprised that she took on some of their traits. It's wild. Why not leave another irid with her to guide her or something? And if they want dragons and humans to change, why didn't they help them change? Basically, they act like Zihnal and then got mad with the result.
Yes. There's so much hypocrisy in what the irids have done and how they respond. It's really frustrating. I also think it's extremely poor form to judge the entire human race based on one person and one dragon's experience with that person. We know Violet is a good person and we love her and all of that, But what if Andarna had bonded someone like Jack Barlow? It's crazy to me that they're just like, yep, Violet has made some poor choices. We know little to nothing about the context of those decisions. And now we think all humans are trash, unworthy of our acknowledgement. And that just feels really unfair. I mean, how would the irids like it if they met one irid and they're like, yeah, irids are worthless trash dragons? Not really fair. Not a fair assessment.
Yeah, I totally agree, though. It is very hypocritical. They have a very holier-than-thou attitude, which I don't really like.
Yes. Yep. Those are the words that I use in the working thoughts, and I just hear that all the time. Holier than thou, holier than thou. Like, that's them.
The hits keep coming when the irids tell Andarna they think she is a weapon and that their breed is born for peace, not violence, like the others. I find the language kind of interesting because I would like to know, how did the irids become different and decide to be specifically peaceful when all the other dragons are not? Also, I have to point out, are they peaceful or just passive? It seems to me like it's super easy to be peaceful when you run away from the world and never get involved, even if it's to fight against an evil.
Ooh, damn, you can say that again. Fuck the irids, okay? Fuck the irids. I'm getting heated, guys. As I said, I foreshadowed this in the beginning of the episode. Everything is making me so angry.
Anyways, to keep the commentary about them rolling, in general, for the irids to refer to the humans and the other dragons as war-loving weapons, it just really irks me, because how are you supposed to make peace with an evil entity that drains the life out of you and the ground? I don't think anybody who's experiencing that would just take it and be okay with it. That goes against the nature of any living being. All living beings have a drive to survive. Nobody's gonna sit there and take being killed off without fighting back,
Oh, yeah. I mean, what would the irids have done? And it seems like they were involved in setting up the wards in Navarre and Eurasia. So it seems like they fought back, quote unquote. Ugh.
I don't know. I did kind of have a side thought, though. So I wonder if this sentiment is alluding to the idea that perhaps venin are not all truly evil. Are there some good venin, like Xaden? Or are there venin who are working against other venin, possibly? Again, what did they know? Why do they have this opinion? Next, we finally get a full explanation of why Andarna is called the Criterion and why she was left behind. And the quote was, "You were left behind as the criterion, the measurement of their growth, their ability to choose tranquility and harmony with all living things. We'd hoped you would return to tell us the humans had evolved, that they had blossomed under the wardstones and no longer used magic as a weapon, but instead you have shown us the opposite." The first thing I want to note is that they say ability to choose tranquility with all living things. They know about the venin, and yet it seems like they include them under this category of living things, and I just find that kind of interesting. The second thing is, I wonder if when they talk about blossoming under the wardstone, are they talking about the Basgiath wardstone, the Eurasian wardstone, or both? I am kind of inclined to believe they're talking about the Eurasian one because that connects back to Lyra's excerpt from chapter 7, but that's not confirmed. This all, of course, just leads back to the question of what are all the differences between these wardstones? What do those differences mean in terms of how they actually work? Also, why are there only 2 of them? How come they didn't just make a bunch of them throughout Paromial as well?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, we know that they had to be carved and runes put on that, and we don't know what all that entails because something else we know nothing about basically is the wardstones. I do think it's super notable that the irid says wardstones as in plural, not wardstone as in singular. As you mentioned, the excerpt that we have discussed multiple times from chapter 7 indicates that at one point, both wardstones were active, and this statement seems to confirm it. Whenever the irids left, both wardstones were active, and now I really want to know what went down with the Eurasian wardstone and why it has seemingly been inactive for hundreds and hundreds of years.
Give us the answers. It gets more interesting. The dragons are also called out, but the irids say dragonkind has not learned their lesson either, while you, looking at Atrim, gifted your human with ice. He then also looks to Taryn and says, "You armed yours with lightning." And then he looks at Andarna and says, "And you, our very hope, have handed this human something far more dangerous to wield, haven't you?"
Yeah.
I have so many questions. First, is this indicating that signets are not, in fact, a need for the rider or some unique blend between dragon and rider like we've been told? Instead, the dragons just get to choose what gift they give their riders, like what power they are allowed to have. I mean, it's possible that this is generically referring to how the dragons allow riders to access power, and then the irids know somehow what signets were individually manifested, but I don't think that's the case.
Yes. To all of this, I think it is so sus that Riddick starts to argue that's not how signets work, gets cut off. On top of that, think about the excerpt for this very chapter. What we know about dragonkind is nothing compared to what we don't. I am pretty much now convinced everything we know about dragons is either a lie or the Empyrean has only shared half-truths with humans. And now I'm questioning, do the dragons get to pick who gets what signet? Is that an Empyrean decision? Like, do they have big meetings where they all talk about the merits of their riders and they're like, okay, here's who we're going to help ascend to power? Because there is a direct correlation in how powerful and rare a signet is with how high they rise in leadership. Right? You don't see a very basic low power fire wielder being the General Basgiath. You know that Lilith was exceptionally powerful. General Melgren, incredibly rare and powerful signet. I don't know. It makes me question everything.
I think we should be questioning everything. That seems to be the lesson, is that everything we've been told, everything we supposedly, quote unquote, know about the dragons has been incorrect or, as you said, a half-truth.
We live in a house of lies.
Second, with respect to the comment about what Andarna handed Violet, obviously this has to be about her second signet, but like, seriously, what is it? I am so tired of trying to guess what it is. What is the ultra rare, dangerous thing?
Honestly, I forgot we were supposed to be looking for that. I think at this point, it's safe to say that it's not a physical signet like fire and ice, etc. It has to be something with the mind. Just to spout off some possibilities here, we have Truthsayer, Precognition, Amplifier, and Intrinsic, and of course there are other ones, probably ones that we've never even been introduced to. We know that in Navarre, people think being an Intrinsic is extremely dangerous, but do the irids feel the same way about that signet? If they do, it kind of points to the idea that maybe Violet is actually an Intrinsic.
Oh, yeah.
Either way, tired of it. Want to know. I didn't think she was going to drag it out to the end of the book. I'm like, oh my God, like, we just need some answers. We just need some answers.
Them. But anyways, that ends chapter 41. Moving on to chapter 42, the excerpt. This one was correspondence between General Melgren and Queen Maraya. Melgren informs her that to help Krovla defend against the venin, and with respect to their alliance, Navarre has agreed to station 4 dragons and riders at Suniva, and will also be sending a shipment of weaponry. So first of all, this is definitely correspondence set in the current timeline of events. It suggests the venin are progressing further throughout Krovla and directly plays into what we learn at the end of chapter 43. I'm also assuming weaponry refers to alloy daggers. I also found it interesting that Melgren states that they can't station a full riot at Suniva because of the venin's progress throughout Krovla. And I was wondering, is this just because they can't spare the dragons and riders because they basically need all of them all along the border at this point?
I wondered about that too. I think your guess is most likely the reason. They really just can't spare that many, and they can't afford to lose them if Suniva gets overrun. But I did wonder about that as well.
We pick right back off with the irids, and Violet asks what power the irids are referring, and Andarna gifted, but there is no further explanation on the matter. Boo.
Boo. Violet says she is not a horror, and the irid responds, no, you are. She is but what you made her. I'm gonna try not to beat this to death, but this is such bullshit. Obviously, Violet is a notable part of shaping who Andarna is, but let's not forget that she is a dragon first. She abides by the customs and the culture of the Empyrean first. I find it interesting the irids put all the blame on Violet and don't even pause to think about how the Empyrean helps shape who Andarna is. I also want to point out that humans that bond dragons reflect what the Empyrean is looking for. As Andarna says, any humans they find unworthy, they literally turn them into scorch marks, right? So how many times in Fourth Wing did Violet worry because dragons only like the strong, the vicious, the cunning, etc.? Humans, in a way, are shaped by what the Empyrean looks for because, weak, timid, shy, kind. What is the opposite of ruthless? I mean, just kind, thoughtful, whatever.
Compassionate.
that is not prioritized by the Empyrean. And so if anything, the Empyrean other dragons have failed the irids unreachable standard. From where I sit, the reality is that all roads lead back to the Empyrean when it comes to how Andarna turned out. Violet obviously has some culpability in how things played out to a certain extent, but I just don't understand how the irids can be like, yep, Violet, you suck. It's your fault. We're out. Bye. It drives me crazy.
That doesn't make any sense. That's a really good point because dragons, as you said, choose literally everything. Humans wouldn't be bonded to dragons unless the dragons agreed to it. And so, and yet they give them a pass. They're like, oh, yeah, whatever. But you awful, horrible human.
One single human is representative of all of the human race, not to mention a human that is, 20? Is she 21 yet? 21-year-old? Imagine if we had to select one 21-year-old person to represent the entire human race. Oh my God. Get out of here.
That would not go over well.
We're not knocking you early 20s. Yeah, we're not knocking you early 20s, guys. Okay, we were once in our early 20s. I'm just saying, probably the older you get, you sit about every age. Imagine if you had to pick a 30-year-old. Imagine you had to pick a 40-year-old, right? Just in general, right? Picking one person, no matter the age, would probably not reflect well on humans as a whole.
Yeah. But in general, you can't pick just one example and be like, everybody is bad because of you.
Yeah, you're really throwing the baby out with the bathwater.
Your sample size is very small. And
very small, yes.
Violet is, of course, pissed, as are we, because no one talks bad about Andarna. Nobody puts baby in a corner. But
why was that my exact thought, Lorraine? Nobody puts baby in the corner. I almost even typed that, but I didn't because I was worried no one would get the reference. Oh my God. Twin. Oh, we did it again.
But the irids insist they will not help them because while they've kept an eye on the squad's travel, they decided it is not peace you seek, but victory. Which to that, I say, no shit, but...
Dude, you could say the exact same thing to the irids. It's not peace that they seek. If that was true, then they would at least help fire the wardstone. They want to be victorious in the sense that they were right and justified that humans are bad.
True. The statement that really made me realize the core hypocrisy of the irids was when they stated that raising the Iratian wardstone was not their concern, and then they said perhaps the corrupted ones should devour the land in its entirety. Only when they're faced with starvation will they confront the evil they've become. Either they'll die off and the land will regenerate, or they'll confront the abominations they become and change. I find this suggestion to be crazy. I cannot believe that as a peaceful species, they are perfectly fine with innocent people and beings just dying off because of these said abominations. If anything, it seems like raising the wardstones would more align with their viewpoint because the wards would help prevent further bloodshed and war. The only kind of counter, I guess, that I could think of is when Andarna always says, nature likes all things in balance. Balance. I don't know.
Balance. Nature likes things in balance.
Nature likes all things in balance. Maybe the venin taking over completely and then dying off is the only way to restore quote-unquote balance, and this is how the irids see it. Again, I wonder if they just choose to stay uninvolved because getting involved interferes with the course of nature or the outcome that is meant to happen or something. I don't know. I was attempting to try to understand their position. Second of all, I found the part about the venin dying off, which would allow the land to regenerate, to be pretty notable. We ultimately don't know how long venin can live without channeling. We have Violet's estimate from her keeping Jack alive, but we have not gotten any official confirmation on the mortality of venin. And to address the land regeneration statement, if magic can regenerate on its own with time, then that may play into what is going on with the isles that the squad has visited so far. Perhaps the colors becoming more vibrant and being able to feel magic more strongly is an indication of how far along in the regeneration process a place is. The fact that magic can regenerate in a place, however, may seem to counter the idea that dragons bring magic. What did you think?
So glad you brought this up. Everything else you said was infuriating or interesting, but I zeroed in on this so hard. At this point, given how old the irids are, I assume this statement is true, that the land can eventually regenerate its magic. I'm assuming they're basing that off their own personal experience. Now, I'm like, someone go to the Barrens and see what the fuck it looks like. Because it's possible that magic is regenerating me there. We know that's the one place that venin totally drained in the Great War 600 plus years ago, but I would think 600 years is enough time for at least something to regenerate, and that would be really interesting to know. But it also reminded me of when Violet is talking to Xaden back in chapter 34, and she says, in a life without magic, the best medicine is time. And yeah, and I was like, boom. Exactly. The glee I felt in writing that. What if that line is also meant to foreshadow the idea that it just takes time for magic to regenerate?
Ah, yes, absolutely. Canon. Love
Chef's
it.
kiss. Retweet.
Retweet. Yeah. See, I'm telling you, they sneak these crazy little lines in there. And you just sit there like stewing and you're like, that has to be important, but it's never addressed again. But it's like such a truth bomb. And you're like,
yep,
I don't care about the irid. Just tell me about this, okay?
Yes. And then Rebecca's like, I put it in book 3. It was there for you all along. And you're like, Rebecca.
It was 2 words. Magic regenerating. Oh my God. No, I love that connection though. That's a really good point. That has to be correct.
I was thinking real hard on that one.
So in connection to the irid's suggestion that perhaps the venin will confront themselves and change, Andarna asks how they would do that, and a female irid muses their offspring could evolve perhaps. To preface, we have no idea how much the irids really know, and to be honest, I don't trust them to be honest with the squad because we just don't know that much about the irids either. It's also possible the irids don't actually know that much about the venin, but with all that being said, I do wonder if this is alluding to something that will happen or that already has happened. Can venin reproduce with each other or with non-venin humans? And what would happen if they did? Has this actually happened before to create someone who is genetically immune to becoming venin?
Oh, that would be really cool and interesting. I feel like that would take hundreds, if not like thousands of years to breed that into the line, but it's a potential future goal, I guess.
Maybe it's Violet.
Okay, here we go. I forgot I was thinking real hard on this one too. I thought this was a crazy statement to give with absolutely no context. And now I have a new fear unlocked. Little venin babies running around. This conversation did prompt a thought for me, though, and there is a popular theory that was prompted by the fact that Violet has silver hair and the fever Lilith experienced while pregnant, that Lilith was attacked by a venin or her life was threatened and in desperation turned venin to protect her child. There's also a bit of evidence to support in Fourth Wing when Violet is telling Ree that story about her mom came home with red eyes and she started screaming because she thought her mom had turned. If that is the case, that would make Violet the offspring of a venin and a human. Violet clearly represents the best of a lot of character traits, and maybe she is living proof of what the irids are saying here.
Could be.
I don't know. Just throwing it out there.
Could be. Yeah, no, I mean, truly, we never find out why Asher has been doing all this research and stuff, but it's entirely possible that he's been doing it because Lilith was venin and he was trying to find a way. I guess we haven't heavily subscribed to that idea on the podcast so far that Lilith was venin, but
I go back and forth on it.
Same.
If you want to know about that, when we wrap up our Onyx Storm coverage, we do plan on doing a theories episode where we talk about any and all theories that are on the table after we complete Onyx Storm. So if that is a theory you would like to hear more about and you would like us to firmly plant our flags, let us know in a text or a DM, and we will start researching now so that we can prepare ourselves for that. Because, once we say it on the podcast, it lives forever. So we will need some time to really think about that.
So anyways, at this point, Xaden and Garrick arrive back as well, but Andarna continues to push to ask if evolving is the cure for venin. This was a very sobering moment when the irids respond there is no cure. It is not a trade. The soul is not kept by the earth as dark wielders steal its magic. The power exchange kills the soul one piece at a time and death has no cure. So obviously this does not leave one with much hope. It's basically reiterating a lot of what we have already heard with that excerpt that's like there is no cure, there's only control and everything else we've learned so far. But it definitely sucks to also hear it from them because, we've been basically banking on the irids knowing something or like having a solution. And now they're like, nah.
Yeah. I know I mentioned this early in the episode, but I am pretty much firmly in the camp now that there actually is no cure for being venin. And this honestly just bolsters my feelings.
I was looking at specific language, though, and I do think that their choice of words is important. I noted that they say the soul is not kept by the earth. And I was wondering if that is implying it's kept somewhere else, or getting it back is in the hands of someone else, perhaps by the sky or the gods. I also find it interesting that they seem to equate the killing of the soul with death, but we know that the venin are physically still alive. Is it possible they will meet Malik or another god somehow and make an appeal for Xaden's soul? I stated earlier that one of the core phrases associated with Malik is when people say, "We commend your souls to Malik." So if you are symbolically, quote unquote, killing yourself over time with each drawing of power, then I don't think it's unreasonable to think Malik could be taking all those parts of your soul until one day you do officially die for real. But then again, even if Malik is a death god, because he is a god, he may view what the venin are as, abominations as well, like the irids say. So perhaps he doesn't respect them as beings because they are taking something they weren't supposed to have and, altering the natural balance of things. But it's just a thought.
I'm going to have to sit with that. That was a biggie. I'm going to have to sit with it. I do like this idea, but here is my one counter to that. The irid says, the power exchange kills the soul one piece at a time. I don't think the pieces of the soul are kept anywhere by anyone. I think they do exactly what the irid stated. They die. So yeah. I feel like that sort of puts a wrench in the Malik plan.
Well, so they say.
Well, we can't pick and choose what we believe from them and what we don't.
Well, I mean, we haven't believed a lot of things that they've told us. We've kind of been questioning everything that they've said so far. And so.
That's true.
Anyways, yeah, we'll sit and think on that. The last couple of questions are not directly answered by the irids. Andarna asked how the venin were defeated in the Great War, and the response is, apparently they weren't, if you're here asking. And then when Andarna asks, are we the key to defeating them, they only respond, hopeless, and get ready to leave. So I really do feel that there is more that they are not sharing. I just don't believe that there is nothing else they know that would not be helpful. But the fact that they don't outright say, no, we are not, when Andarna asks if the irids are the key feels important to me. And they keep doing this. They don't directly answer the question that is being asked.
Oh, 100%. They know a lot that they're not sharing right now. And to hear them tell it, it seems like they've been around for hundreds and hundreds of years, even potentially predating the Great War. So how can they not?
Right,
know?
Exactly.
Exactly.
I do feel like finding peace, quote unquote, is some cryptic clue, perhaps. It kind of ties back into Theophany, potentially, and how she keeps wanting, Violet to come find her. And she has all these answers for Violet and all that stuff, too. So pretty strongly feel Theophany is bad news. But maybe she is trying to make an alliance.
Oh my God. Get out of here. Get out of here with that.
I don't know. What do they mean by peace? What do the irids mean by that? I just need to know. Riddick gives Xaden and Garrick the depressing cliff notes of the convo thus far. The irids once again reiterate to Andarna that she is magic, and yet all she uses it for is violence. And that did make me wonder, what does using magic for peace look like? I'm trying to brainstorm other magic-based solutions. For example, would it be possible for Andarna to restore a soul in the case of the venin? I keep thinking about how in Warwick's journal it said the breath of the life of the six and the one combined and set the stone ablaze in an iron flame. Technically, he wasn't wrong, because it's clear that there is a distinction between the way the irids have evolved and the way that the other 6 breeds of dragons have. I feel like in learning that they are magic, there has to be something that they can do. It also kind of has me a little bit rethinking the whole Feathertails being juveniles thing, because I wonder if this is also just a cover to protect baby irids. And I have another thought about this, I think, shortly, but...
I took this more as a generic commentary that you can use magic for good to innovate and create and just progress a society in general. And the irids abhor using it for any sort of violence. But at the same time, let's pretend that there's been peace for hundreds of years and the irids are like, oh, everything's so great, peace, 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 peace. When that peace is threatened, do you really think the irids would just lay back and let the peace be destroyed? No, I feel like they would fight back. And so, see, I feel like there's always this circular level of hypocrisy that just doesn't add up. The math ain't mathin', you know?
Right. Or like if the venin come to where the irids are, what would they do?
Exactly. They're just going to be like, we're peaceful. Please leave us be. No, they're fucking dragons.
Bullshit. Yeah.
Bullshit. Exactly. And Andarna responds to this by saying, you preach peace while only having known its privilege. And I wanted to give Andarna a standing ovation for saying this because it is so true. That lives rent-free in my head. I mean, yeah, I feel like that's a death blow to the irids' whole philosophy. How nice it must be from your pedestal to judge us when you have known the privilege of peace and your way of life, your very lives have not been threatened. And that is why I hate the irids, but not Andarna, just the other ones.
True. Yes. What you said. Retweet.
Man, I'll be angry the rest of the night now. Damn it.
In the end, the irids decide that the world was not ready for Andarna, and they determine that she is not an irid in nature and will not be allowed entrance to their isle nor instruction in their ways. Once again, I feel very bad for Andarna. She just wanted to know her family, and they just outright rejected her for something that she had no control over.
It destroyed me when Violet says, Andarna, no, you're fierce and smart and brave and loyal, and none of this is your fault. You're perfect. And Andarna says, I am not. And I'm like, oh my God. Yet another reason to hate the irids. They made Andarna upset.
I know. But on a separate note, I would really like to know where their isle is. I was previously thinking perhaps it's like in these volcanic minor isles or whatever. I was also thinking, is it potentially Loisum? That's the last major isle that they haven't explored yet. But then I started thinking, if Loisum is associated with the goddess Loyal like we think, then it could be kind of fitting, like the idea of universally loving everyone and everything would feed into bringing peace. And it would connect back to our theory about love being a strong component in keeping Xaden from turning more venin or possibly curing him in some way.
True. I do feel that Hedotus was supposed to be peaceful. What could be violent about pursuing knowledge? Same for Zihnal. What could be violent about luck? And here we are. We saw violence on both of those isles. And so it just makes me question what they would actually find on Loisum. Hypothetically, should it be great and nice and kind? Sure. But I thought that about a lot of these other isles, and I got that.
Right, exactly. There's probably a catch.
Yeah,
their love
certainly
is conditional.
Exactly. The irids do say they have a long flight ahead of them, and I think it's most likely that they just inhabit a larger minor isle that is uninhabited. They clearly do not like humans, and so I just don't think they would put themselves in proximity to any human.
That's a fair point. Yeah, I did have a counter to my thought about them potentially living on Loisum, and it was, irids do not associate with humans, and so it doesn't make sense for them to reside on an isle that is inhabited by humans.
Mm-hmm.
So 4 of the irids depart, but one named Leothin and another female remain to ask more questions. Leothin realizes Violet had not known Andarna was a juvenile when she first bonded. Xaden and Garrick get slide whistled into the convo as well. So first of all,
slide whistled. I like using that as a verb. I'm like, let me slide whistle you into this conversation over here, friend.
Yeah, get in here. Yeah. So first of all, I want to flag Leothin specifically because A, we learned this irid's name, and B, I looked up what the name Leothin means. Leothin is thought to derive from Leothan, I'm probably not saying that right, which is of Irish origin and means warrior or fighter. I wonder if this means we're going to get more from Leothin later. Will he come back and fight for them or help them, possibly?
Ooh, that's interesting, especially because based on this conversation, the irids are very anti-fighting, so it seems interesting that they would give any of their kind a name like that. Of course, now, do irids ascribe to the same meanings and definitions that humans do? Probably not. But it is interesting. And I feel like there's enough evidence throughout the Empyrean series to support that Rebecca is often intentional with her names. Yes. And so that, to me, it opens the door for that, I think.
I did also find it interesting that in response to the general policy of keeping hatchling and juveniles hidden from humans until after the dreamless sleep, Leothin says the uniformity assures all hatchlings are cared for without deference to breed or den.
And once again, we get cut off information.
So I had a little bit of I have these frequently. So another conspiratorial moment where I was like, are we supposed to think, oh yeah, that makes sense. This is fair. But what if this is because there actually is some sort of difference in the way that irids would be treated, because there actually is a difference between irid hatchlings and other ones? Why would they be afraid that dragons would be treated differently depending on the breed?
And is it that dragon kind started treating each other unfairly or differently, or did humans based on the breeds of dragons? And so you could go either direction in that.
So right after this, Leothan and the female irid with him both recoil at Xaden, stating abomination as they look at him, and he has bright red rims around his irises. I have a question for you. Do you think this was triggered because of the magic the irids used to link Xaden into the convo? As far as we know, this typically tends to happen, like the iris changing color and all that, when he channels power. And though it doesn't seem like he intentionally drew power at this time, perhaps with the irids being magic, it triggered the venin response.
Okay, I wondered about this a lot, especially because it's described that the eyes are red and then it quickly disappears. In the past, when he's channeled from the source, his eyes stay red for a while. That's why he always has to disappear for a while. I reread this a couple of times to answer this very question. When Xaden and Garrick walk up, it says, "What is going?" Garrick twitches. "Fuck, that hurts." Then it says, Xaden grimaces, lowering his head and squeezing his eyes shut. Violet then thinks, I'm guessing they just got the slide whistle treatment. So I feel like if you're taking that at face value, then that's what Garrick is responding to. But I was wondering, what if Garrick says that hurts because Xaden is drawing just a tiny bit of power from the area and or from Garrick?
Okay, I'm glad you were the one that said this, because
I got you, girl.
And then I left it out because I was a little bit like,
no,
I don't know about that. I was kind of like,
since I said it, it's a good thought. So no, but I mean, they leave it open to interpretation because I really was
that's true.
What made his eyes flash red? That's so odd. And so really there's two answers. It has something to do with the irids and the slide whistle, or for whatever reason, he did accidentally channel just the tiniest little smidgen. And that's why Garrick is like, oh, that hurts. I don't know.
It's a great question. Send us a text, guys. Yeah. What did you think? What's going on in this scene?
Or if you think we're both just morons, let us know.
So also, I touched on this briefly, but to add to the possibility of irids acting kind of like godlike with their word choices, I definitely noticed that the female irid says to Sigale, your kind is beyond redemption. There are a lot of word choices that just feel goddish in a way, or like religiously connotated. You have abomination, redemption, abhorrence, harvest. I'm not ready to be like, yes, the dragons are gods, but they kind of act like it. Clearly, the irids also distinguish the other dragons as different enough to refer to them as a different kind, which I also find kind of suspicious. It could also be that there is something about Sigale now that's different because of her bond to Xaden, and so they're just kind of looping her in with him. But I don't know, something's kind of off, and I'm just gonna keep it in the watch book. Leothan and the female irid take off after this, and when Violet looks up at Xaden, his eyes have returned to their new normal. Obviously, everyone is upset at this point. Xaden puts his shield up, and Darda retreats into the jungle, and then Terror follows after her. On top of all that, it is time to come clean. Riddick definitely saw Xaden's eyes and demands the truth from Violet. Honestly, I have been waiting for this moment for kind of a while. It really was only a matter of time before other people figured out Xaden is venin, and the time has come.
Yep. And we also talked about in a previous episode on how the squad would react. I feel like Violet already used her pass on the whole, I didn't tell you because I was protecting you. And we'll talk more about Riddick's response in the next chapter. But I feel like, I can't say this conversation was directly foreshadowed, but it tracks with the progression of the story, right? Someone was going to find out. Riddick's response seems very on par with our experience with him and the rest of the squad. And I don't know why Violet thought she was going to get away with this indefinitely. I mean, come on.
Crazy.
Crazy girl.
So that ends chapter 42. Moving on to It's chapter 43, our final one. The excerpt. It's about time we get some info on the venin. Supposedly they are doing all this research and yet we barely hear anything about it. But aside from that, this excerpt was from the Venin Compendium compiled by Drake Cordella. In it, he states it is better to hunt the enemy during the day because their markings are easily hidden by the shadows of night. It would also not surprise him to find that the enemy walks among them. Ooh. This is not the first time that we've been alerted to how the venin can hide in plain sight. We learned from Jack Barlow that a sage and Baben ranked venin in particular can hide their veninness and wouldn't be able to be detected by new venin. We've also seen that venin can channel and live within the wards. I do find the specific wording of the physical features of venin being hidden by the shadows of night to be interesting. You could just say darkness, but when you start talking about shadows specifically, it immediately brings to mind Xaden or, the power of shadow wielding. So
I thought the exact same thing. I think this excerpt has double meaning. First, it references Xaden and how he's been around everyone as venin, and they had no idea. And second, I think it's foreshadowing of us finding out that people we know are secretly venin. Looking at you, Colonel Panchek. I have not let that go. I'm still thinking about it.
Still thinking about it. That's right. So Violet quickly gives Riddick the basics about Xaden's venin status, but she can't go into too much detail because Mira and Auric have now landed as well. I found Violet's thoughts about Xaden notable as they decide what to do next. She thinks everything about him, his loyalty, his intelligence, softer edges no one else but me gets to see, and whatever parts are missing, dead, according to the irids, will live without them. It is feeling less and less possible that Xaden can be cured, but we know Violet, to her own detriment at times, has promised they will save him. And as I was thinking about that term, and the context of the gods, and my point about all of these religiously connotated words coming up in these discussions, and knowing that Violet's partially dedicated, saving kind of takes on an interesting possibility. Will Violet save Xaden from his sins of being venin, or however you want to put it, or through an act of God by doing something with the gods? I don't know.
Just gonna note it here.
Note it here, yeah.
At this point, Violet is really just not confronting reality. She thinks he's still whole to me. As long as we can keep him from channeling from the earth, find a way for him to control that craving, we'll be all right. We have to be. And reading this, I'm like, oh, is that all? That's not too bad, right? Sure, no problem. Girl, I feel so sad for Violet because she is just holding on for dear life. And I just don't think this is going to end well for her, at least in the immediate future. She's really not confronting reality. And I think that's evidenced through her conversation with Riddick. Riddick is just like, are you kidding me? And Violet's like, he's fine. He's fine. And like, no, he's not. Xaden is literally telling Violet, it's not if, it's when. And she's like, it's still you, babe. And don't get me wrong, I'm here for that romantic shit. Okay, I'll eat it up. But from the logical perspective, I'm like, oh my God, Violet.
Yeah, the denial is real for sure. So, fully aware that they could be court-martialed and without any idea of what's happened during their absence, the squad decides they will fly back to the continent via a safer route through the Isles.
I have to say here, I think it was a mistake for them not to go to Loisum. I get why they did it, but I think they should have went. At this point, why not? What's a few more days? I know their justification is sound. They don't have an army, whatever. Who knows? Maybe they do. Maybe they have weapons. Maybe they have something to offer them. It's worth going to find out. They already went all that way. You may as well.
Yeah, I agree that it's silly, but they should have gone while they were right there anyway. Next, Riddick and Violet finally have their private meeting, and it is noted that they take an agate sound shield rune with them. Again, would love to know if A, it actually works, and B, just finally get some helpful info on the runes that we have been very patiently waiting for.
I think it does work. Otherwise, they wouldn't have taken it. And Violet certainly would not rely on it to keep her secret as she spills her guts to Riddick if she wasn't pretty certain that it works. I mean, we do get confirmation that some do, some don't. And they've had enough time to test it by now. Obviously, we don't get text confirmation that it works, but I think that it does.
So Violet finally comes clean to Riddick about the extent of her secret keeping.
First and foremost, let me complain about this conversation. I fucking hate when people do the whole, it's not my secret to tell. I hate that in real life. I hate that in books. I hate it all the time. Either it is because it's relevant to you or the situation, or then I'm like, why did you involve me in the first place? You know what I'm saying?
True.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm sure there are a few instances in my life where I've understood the context, but like for the most part, I hate when people say that. It's a cop-out. And I think Riddick calls her out on that when he says, if you're hiding something from us, then you probably shouldn't be doing it. It's not because it wasn't your secret to tell.
Right, true. So I did ultimately agree with Riddick predominantly in this conversation. Xaden is not 100% himself, and it is alarming that he's channeled 3 times, even if it was purely to protect Violet. On a separate note, I guess this is official text confirmation of how many times he's channeled and the fact that he did in fact channel from Violet's conduit in Deverelli. Riddick also realizes that Violet has been feeding Jack to keep him alive.
Mm-hmm.
I once again love Riddick in this scene because A, he is being brutally honest with Violet and is looking at things objectively as opposed to subjectively like Violet. It also hit hard when after learning Garrick, Bodhi, and Imogen knew about Xaden, he points out, and they're all loyal to him. I don't think the other Mark ones would sacrifice Violet if it was between them. I think that they would help Violet if needed since they have expressed concern for her and they know how important she is to Xaden. But it is nice to know that there are people specifically in Violet's corner to keep an eye out for her first if that push comes to shove moment ever happens.
Absolutely. I really like that Riddick, even though he was angry, stayed articulate and held Violet accountable when he said, "Holy shit, Violet, do you have any respect for your own life? Or is it just Ryerson we're concerned with now?" I was so happy, as you said, that someone is looking out for Violet's best interests. And I think that is something that Violet is sorely lacking, is the vision to think about her safety, well-being, and her importance. Violet often underestimates her importance to her loved ones, her squad, but also to the war effort. I don't know if she's the most powerful rider yet, but she's pretty darn close, right? She is one of the only non-alloyed weapons. And so for a myriad of reasons, I like that Riddick is like, yeah, Violet, you're actually important. Didn't know if you knew that.
It's the airplane rule, right? You gotta always put
yourself
mask on first. Yes,
Mhm.
yeah, before you can help others. So
That's Lorraine, always putting yourself first. No, I'm just kidding. Just kidding.
But like for real, yes,
But,
I would
like, for real,
absolutely
though,
put
yeah.
my oxygen mask on
Yeah.
first.
No, I mean, the logic is really sound. I can start putting my oxygen mask on one of my kids, and then I'll pass out, and then all of us will be deprived of oxygen except for the one kid I could help, So, no, totally.
True. I also thought it was fair for Riddick to bring up the point that as a venin and the Duke of Tyrandor, who also has a seat in the Cenarium, it is possible he could, quote, tear apart the kingdom from within or betray them. The Xaden we know would never, but that will always just linger in the back of your mind unless he is cured.
Not only that, but as Riddick points out, he's bonded to one of the most vicious and powerful dragons, which makes him lethal in basically every aspect. He's basically unstoppable. And if he channels, whoo, baby, all bets are off.
Riddick gets real when he asks how long do we have until he's an ASIM, until he's physically unable to deny the call of the sage. There are not accounts of initiates just walking away from the power. Very concerning. I'm not surprised. No venin is going to go leaving accounts of how they stewed an initiate because they can't even, discuss being a venin at all without being killed. So,
I don't know. This still made me physically ill. We are constantly getting lines like, it's not if, it's when. What if this is foreshadowing that Xaden channels again and turns ASIM and then leaves to be with the sage because he physically cannot stop himself?
Oh,
yep.
Yikes.
Sounds bad. Oh, yikes.
Yeah.
Yikes is right.
So if they turn ASIM, that is like for sure, they're gonna get recruited by a sage. Like they're just gonna go straight to the sage when that happens.
I mean, I don't think
don't know.
I don't think it's like their feet walk themselves there, but I think similar in the way it's described in Umbriel, you feel a pull to the temple. It's almost undeniable. I think it's something similar to that.
Big yikes.
Yikes.
I did find it interesting that when Violet counters about her urgency to find Xaden a cure and how too much has been sacrificed because of the venin, she says, I just know that I have to find the answers, whether they're in forgotten books or some dark wielder's head. It is still possible you could find important information in a book somewhere, but in a dark wielder's memory? Could this be like a little Easter egg clue? Maybe this is going to be Violet's second signet, entering people's memories without like needing to touch them or whatever. It does stand to reason that if there are venin that have lived for a very long time, then one of them must have some sort of knowledge about what happened way back when. What better way to learn about the enemy than from the enemy's own mind?
I mean, you know what? At this point, that's not a bad thought. It's not a bad thought.
I would, assume that their memories remain intact even if they become more venin, like from their early days of like pre-veninness. So I guess the question is really just how do you get access to them? Like, you can't touch them without being drained, so it has to be something that doesn't require physical touch.
True, but wouldn't that just make Violet a kind of intrinsic? Basically a Dane without the touching, right? I can sift through your memories without touching you, which would be a crazy signet to have.
True, but they do make a distinction between being an intrinsic and being a memory reader. They have made that difference. But I agree. I mean, I feel like reading memories is kind of in the same camp as being an intrinsic, but I don't know. Also, speaking of which, this was kind of a tangent thought, but can Imogen wipe memories without physically touching someone? I feel like it's implied that she does, but that's not confirmed.
I always thought that she did, but honestly, I'm not 100% sure. We've never actually seen her do it. I kept thinking about when she goes with Violet to talk to Jack Barlow, and I want to see she does like grab Jack and do it. But then I'm like, well, Jack was too weak to...
They don't say
I don't know. Yeah, it's
unsure. It's always just like Imogen comes with her to do these things, but there's no description of the physical process of her taking away somebody's memory. I would like to know, though, because if Imogen doesn't have to physically be touching someone, then that makes her, well, I guess she's just wiping memories specifically, though. She can't just like, I don't know. Anyways, it was just a side thought that I was having at the moment, so... Next, with Violet's heightened emotion, we see her power snap, and it is described that lightning strikes the tree and thunder booms. We already wondered if this was perhaps an increase in Violet's first signet when they were in Unreal, but I feel pretty confident in stating it has expanded at this point. We clearly see that Violet is desperate to find a way to help Xaden and keep him on their side.
I thought it was very telling when Violet says, "There isn't a rider alive capable of stopping him at full power now, let alone what he could become if he truly turns. And don't say that I can, because the truth is that I won't. Even if I hone my signet to his level, which would take the years he's had, I could no more hurt him than he could hurt me. He is everything to me." There's so many layers to this quote. First and foremost, I think Violet is right. There is no rider that could contend with him. Violet maybe, but as she points out, she really needs the time to hone her signet, which she really doesn't have. Time is the one thing they cannot afford. Second, It is devastating to hear Violet say this, because I really think in book 4, or probably 5, Violet will have to make a choice that sacrifices Xaden but saves everyone else, and it will destroy her. And I just feel like this is an emotional, I'm not going to say foreshadowing, but like an emotional breadcrumb that builds us up for that moment, and I hate it. I hate it.
Yeah, not feeling good. At that admission, Riddick asks for a hard line that needs to be crossed in order for him to keep the secret. I especially love that Riddick tells Violet, you can still love someone after you let them go, but you have to tell me there's a line where you will let him go, because if there isn't one, it's not just him we're going to lose. Riddick is giving a lot of tough love in this scene, but I think that is what's needed. This is very ominous, though, because it makes it feel even more likely that we are going to hit that line.
I loved and hated so much of this conversation. I was so proud of Riddick for how he handled it and how he was so protective of Violet. But at the same time, it really felt like foreshadowing for down the road. And I didn't like that one bit.
Ultimately, Violet decides that if Xaden kills another rider without cause, hurts civilians, hurts her friends, the dragons, or hurts her, then that would be the definite line that he is no longer himself. Riddick agrees to that and reiterates that the four of them are stronger together, which I love.
Second squad, fourth wing, forever.
Forever. The combo ends, and when they turn around, surprise, Xaden is waiting by the tree for them.
He's always
lurking.
lurking Zayden.
For a scene that was very intense and serious, I did appreciate the comedic relief when Riddick says, "Quite the conundrum, you see. If I drop my hand, looks like we've been caught doing something we shouldn't." Which we haven't, but if I leave it here. And then right after that, Riddick tries to insist he's not scared of Zayden, and Zayden just responds, "You are. What did you decide?"
This made me laugh so hard. I can just really picture this very vividly in my mind. And just the way Zayden says, "You are." Anyways.
Yeah.
Like, oh my God, I cannot wait for the TV show. I've been getting like more and more excited about it as we read Onyx Storm because all of these scenes just play out in my mind and I cannot wait.
Same. So aside from the comedy, though, I did find it a little unsettling that Zayden is there. I mean, I guess it's expected, but it still feels a little bit odd. I'm assuming he just used the bond to figure out where they went, I guess.
Probably. I mean, Violet did just strike lightning, so he probably just followed the lightning.
That's true, too, but he's just always there.
I know, but what Riddick decides is really important for Zayden's fate. Like, if Riddick decides to tell everybody, a lot of them will probably try to kill him. So it's kind of like, hey, buddy, I need to know if I need to jump on Zihnal and fly away.
Fly away.
I'm just saying. Escape.
Yeah. No, fair enough. Yeah. Riddick informs Zayden that Violet needs to tell Ree, Sawyer, and Jasenia for now. And I gotta say, it was quite clever of him to separate terms for his agreement with Violet versus his agreement with Zayden to keep quiet. I also really loved how thought out Riddick's reasoning is. He says Jasenia needs to know so she knows what to research, and the rest of them are the only ones who can actually be in class with Violet and like be where she is at all times. It was also a bit depressing when Zayden clarifies the question of whether he turns fully is when, not if. And I was like,
Yep, that hurt to read.
I know I have been siding with Riddick and his reasoning in this case, but it never is good to hear it from Zayden, but it's not good.
It's not good. But at the same time, I like that Zayden is grounded in reality and not living in some delusional fantasy land that he's fine and everything is going to be fine. I think it's really important that he at least makes the attempt to convey to Violet that he is not okay, will not be okay. And he himself, being the one who's experiencing it, can most adequately convey that to her. And I do appreciate that he is not giving her false hope.
Yeah, I agree with that. In the camp of things that are not great to hear, it was also not lovely to hear that should leadership find out about Zayden, then Violet's life is also at risk because killing her is the easiest way to kill him.
Yep. Never thought about that till now.
I didn't really either, but that is a great concern. The good thing for now is that Zayden is still 90% Zayden, as Violet has argued, and it was encouraging to hear that he says, "I don't care who she tells when it comes to her safety." I did find it hilarious, though, when, after the tension of the conversation wears off, Riddick tries to clarify that the lightning strike wasn't because of anything spicy between them. And was just saying in response, he didn't think it was because it wasn't a big enough strike. The shifts between funny and scary are constant because after that, Zayden says, "If it's between her and me, I choose her. Kill the other I and I become." And I was like, no, ominous, scary.
No. And I get to do it like this. Violet, no. Zayden, venin, no. Lauren and I watch White Lotus. Yeah. And Parker Posey, who is the Southern accent mom, that's been a viral thing. And Lauren and I have been saying it. And honestly, I say it in my house, my kids started saying it. It's just so fun to go, tsunami, Buddhism, no. So you can just catch me running around my house going, "Popper, no." It's way too fun.
No.
Violet,
it really is.
No.
That audio is either that audio or the other thing I see a lot are like the Severance audio.
Yeah. They're too fun.
Mark is hot. Helly's hot.
We do want you guys to know that we do have lives outside of this and that we're not just Onyx Storm automatons and that we do enjoy other elements of society and cultures. We're fun.
Yes,
we're fun in all accounts.
But yeah, anyways.
I also thought it was so funny after this whole conversation, Riddick says, "I've never been happier to be single. You two have some serious issues." And if that ain't the gospel truth.
Oh, absolutely. How not to be in a relationship? Well, I guess they're goals, but they're also not.
I'm not. I was just going to say, I was like, because I kind of love them, but like, do I want to be them? No.
Anyways, after this, Riddick departs, leaving Xaden and Violet to talk. And my little heart splits some more for him when he states he felt that the entire mission failed because of his veninness and that Leofin seemed like he might have come around if not for him. And then you pair that with when he says, I think the abomination comment and what it represents requires taking a moment of space for us both to consider the undeniable fact that I'm the worst possible thing for this mission, for my province, and for you. Gut punch.
Yep.
This very direct non-denial is definitely indication that he is still mostly Xaden for now, at least. Within this scene, we learn that he hasn't channeled for a month, which is good news, at least. I love that Violet still very much loves him in spite of everything and says, let me know when you're done brooding and we'll see how big my next strike is. Until then, we're flying home tomorrow. Sassy, confident, excellent. The squad departs for the journey back to Basgiath, and many people are unhappy or heartbroken, and I find it interesting that Violet briefly thinks, logically, I know there's no chance Theophany is aware we're beyond the wards, but she shouldn't have known I'd be in Anka either. Either our flight plan pays off or Theophany chooses not to attack. Eventually, they make it within the wards without a problem. To be honest, I am just waiting for the next meeting with Theophany. Between that thought and her note that she leaves, it is just inevitable at this point.
Has to be. We're getting dangerously close to the last 100 pages of this book, and that means big trouble. Perhaps Theophany-sized trouble, if I do say so myself.
Violet's gonna get got.
She gonna get got. Maybe we'll get some damn answers, so it'll be all right, though.
Upon landing back in Basgiath, Andarna flies straight for the Vale, and the only small consolation is that the OG squad is back together again. A brief recap is given about how out of control Violet was, and Riddick punched a cook. Most importantly, I love Riddick's comment when he says, this is good, this is right, as they're like in a nice with
group
each other.
hug. I have to read exactly what Riddick says because it is too funny not to repeat, and it is oddly an accurate account of what went down on the quest squad. He tells Ree, fuck did we need you on that trip. Violet was out of control. She kicked a queen's ass and poisoned Zane's mom, and all 3 had Dodic heads estate, but secured us an army. And I was like, well, yeah, that pretty much sums it up. Then Ree asked what he did, and he goes, not much, put out a couple of fires, punched a cook. And I'm like, yep, that's basically what Riddick did. Yeah. He has a way of just bringing levity to every conversation, and I just love him.
I do too, yes. Unfortunately, with good news, there's also bad, and they inform Ree and Sawyer of Traeger's death and their failure to get the irids to come help. On top of that, the dreaded court-martial punishment arrives in the form of General Atos. Before discussing punishment for disobeying orders, he first informs them that Kat is one step closer to the throne, and then he also hands Violet a missive, which has been opened. So first of all, the fact that Atos gave it to her and it's been opened and read, suspicious. I've been kind of suspicious of Atos, but I'm getting increasingly more so. We do know that Atos has been reading her mail for a while, so that's kind of like the counter. But I do kind of start to wonder if he knows who T is, and if he doesn't, will he figure it out?
It just hit me. You're trying not to say it. You think Atos is a venin that he's in league with Theophany.
Possibly.
That's what you think, right? Yeah, that's what you think. You're just trying not to say it. That's totally, it just hit me when you said it. Okay. Well, you know what?
I mean, he's like watching her so intently. Even if he is not in league with her, he read that note, and I'm sure he's going to be like hot on the trail after this. You know what I mean?
Well, we know someone in leadership is venin. It's just a question of who.
Yeah.
Right? There's like 4 main choices. Panchek, Markham, Atos, and Melgren. I feel like Atos and Panchek are kind of our top contenders. So
true. Also, why do we only think there's one person in leadership?
Oh my God.
How did we get to that point?
No, don't say that. I can't. Okay, there can only be one. I know. No, it's totally possible.
Multiple, so
everybody is venin.
Nobody is trustworthy. Moving on. Second, Theophany was indeed watching them. She was literally right nearby because the squad flew in somewhere between Corden and Drathis, and Pavis is like almost halfway between those areas when you look on the map. And I definitely keyed in on the part where it notes, I do wonder why you spent so much effort when I have the one thing you seek above all else. At this point, she has to be referring to like a cure or some answers about venin, right? It could be about irids, but it seems more likely that it's about venin.
That's what I think. She has to know that Zehyllna is a venin just by sensing whatever.
The veninous.
We know that the venin,
the
venin within. And it's probably pretty obvious that he and Violet are in a relationship, if not having that information fed to her. So I would say so.
Also, how did she get this into Basgiath? Was it through other venin and leadership? Possibly other riders bringing it in from the border? I don't know.
Honestly, totally possible she just distance wheeled it in and out of there.
Oh, that's right.
We know she's done it before. Yeah, she did in the beginning of the book.
How did I forget?
Yeah, she doesn't even need to use anyone. Yeah, she just operates in and out,
That's so true. Yeah, but then she had to hand it to somebody. So did she hand it to Atos or did she just drop it off in the mailroom and then peace?
I think she dropped it off in the mailroom. Makes sense.
I don't know.
That tracks for me.
Okay.
Mail
so the final
time.
thing, at this point, I think it's signed, sealed, and delivered. We're going to get another meeting with Theophany before this book ends when she says, do enjoy your time until our next rendezvous. Don't worry, I'm making all the arrangements. I honestly am wondering if Theophany does have some sort of precognition or something. How does she know when their next trip is going to be? How does she know that they will meet again? Lots of questions. So, as if that wouldn't have been an epic stopping point already, we have one more piece of big news to find out, and that is that Suniva fell to Darkwielders and Queen Maraya is dead.
No! I mean, I know we didn't really know her at all, but she seemed nice, so...
Maraya!
No! Venin! I'll never get tired of doing that. It's so fun, guys.
You're so good at it. You have a very good accent.
I'm good at impressions, I will say. That is one of my talents.
So, anyways, Peromio's capital is down and their queen is dead, which is alarming and leaves the kingdom extremely vulnerable. And as a side note, I have at times questioned the trustworthiness of Takaris because something just seems off about his access to resources, information, and just his penchant for collecting things. I don't have a case or really any evidence to support this, but do you think it's possible Takaris betrayed Queen Maraya? I mean, Corden still remains completely fine as far as we know. I don't know. Something's off.
Yeah, I feel like we should table that for the next episode when we read more about what exactly went down in Suniva. It's hard to say without knowing more information, but my gut says no. I don't think Takaris is the most honorable person, but to me, if he wanted the throne that badly, why wouldn't he have just had Maraya killed years ago? Why now?
He was waiting for the right time.
Maybe.
Or maybe it was a crime of opportunity.
Possible, but I don't think so. I don't feel great about Takaris, but he's very low on my watch list. I'll say that.
He's mid. He's mid on mine. But anyways, that now concludes our assembly meeting. And now we just have our favorite moments.
I liked in Zihnal after Xaden gets his gifts and he tells Violet, you can put it in my box of nothingness. We'll keep them on the bedside table. And something about that was just kind of nice and normal. And I like to imagine a world where all the baddies are gone and life is good. And they have that as a memorabilia of their time together where they all almost died. And Xaden was a venin and I bummed myself out. But I thought it was kind of cute in the moment.
Except that box is definitely not going to be of nothingness. Okay, we're on glass box watch. So
Lorraine, no.
No. Conspiracies. Okay, so my first favorite moment was when they arrive in Zihnal, everyone gets their bonds back, and Violet thinks, I give myself a second to smile to revel in the happiness of my friends who have been denied the closest of their relationships for the last couple of weeks. Just for a brief little moment there. Things were nice.
A brief, fleeting moment, for sure. I like when Xaden tells Violet, I hate to break it to you, but you were selected by a general among dragons. You can choose to step into leadership or he can drag you. Either way, you're going to end up in front.
Damn. My next one was, they'd better have an army worth handling cow shit for.
My next one is when Darren says, I am busy with curmudgeonly things. I'm like, oh.
I love Taryn, yeah. I did find some of the things that the irids said funny. Mostly still hate them. But
yeah,
this one was funny. And so when They told Violet, and you feel a dagger is sufficient? I believe you are right, Dason. The human, female, lacks intelligence.
Fair enough. I mean, what else is she going to do? But I did think it was funny. She's holding a dagger against 6 dragons. And the dragons are like, girl, please.
Put that away. Yeah.
Yeah. On a much more somber note, I love when Andarna says, Violet has never failed me.
Oh. Never.
Yeah.
And also on a touching note, this was actually from Riddick. It's when he says why she's incredible, brave, fierce, vicious, everything the Empyrean respects, when he's talking about Andarna.
Oh, that's so true. She is. She's wonderful.
Nobody puts baby in a corner.
That's right. Nobody puts baby in the corner. Okay, I'll stop.
No.
We shouldn't have started it because, oh my God, I won't be able to stop the rest of the night. On a more fuck you note, I liked when Andarna said, you preach peace while only having known its privilege. And I was like, yeah!
True. Yep. The reality check that we needed.
Mm-hmm.
So my second to last one, I know this probably wasn't meant to be funny. It's just like Riddick in his flippant tone. He's talking about Xaden, and he's like, we won't let that happen. You'll be off doing evil shit wherever evil shit gets done. In reference to the possibility of Violet being killed if Xaden gets discovered.
That was a good line. Like I said, he just has a way of making a bad situation a little bit lighter, and I love that about him.
Yes, yeah.
I do like when Riddick tells Violet in a more serious note, you can put all your faith in him as long as you leave a little logic for yourself. And if those aren't the words that Violet so desperately needed to hear, I don't know what is.
It's reminding her of her core. Violet used to be very logically oriented. Until Xaden came along. Just kidding. We love Xaden, but...
Well, I think about that excerpt from Lilith all the time to Asher when she's like, I fear when she falls in love, logic will cede to love or something, whatever it is.
Right. Yeah.
And I'm like, yep, Lilith called that. She knew her daughter well.
And then my final one is when Xaden tells Riddick, well aware. First, because I trust Violet. And second, it wasn't a big enough strike.
Oh, mine follows that perfectly. Mm-hmm. Violet says, let me know when you're done brooding and we'll see how big my next strike is. And I was like, whoo, please, can we get a little of that action back because I'm bummed out right now.
We're ready for a lightning show.
Oh, yeah, a show. We want a full show, okay?
Yes. Lightning everywhere.
A big show.
All right, guys. So that now concludes our episode. Thank you all for joining us for another episode of the Booktown Fantasy Podcast. As always, we are so glad you found us. So please leave us a review, subscribe to the podcast, and follow us on Instagram or YouTube to keep up with us on a daily basis. That's all we've got for you guys today.
So stay violent,
and we'll catch you all next week. Bye.
Bye. And stay tuned for 1,000 million trillion billion bloopers. Each member of the squad had to select the card that Zihnal. Why can't I say Zihnal? I get to the Z and I'm like, it's like I stall out.
Add it in. Zihnal.
I think I can edit that out. Okay. I have no idea what the voice is like. I think it was actually a man, but that's what I came up with on the fly. So everyone like it.
This time it comes from research titled Zehyllna, Zehyllna, Isle of Zihnal. It discusses how to live in Zihnal. Oh my God. Okay. Can't speak either today.
Oh, I think I wrote that, but forgot to make it blue.
Yeah, I was like, wait,
you're like, wow, I hyped. I'm like, you're hyping yourself up.
Right,
you're like,
yeah.
I did. I'm gonna start doing that and be like, wow, Addison, you are on fire.
Riddick. Either our flight plan
pays off.
Okay.
You can do this. You can do it.
So close, I know. Okay. Either our flight plan do it. Okay. Either our flight pay. Keep doing it.
Take 7.
Okay.
After Xaden gets his gift and he says to Violet, I like after Xaden, I'm trying to go too fast. Okay.